Sure. Good
Thank
evening,
you.
everyone. Chair Brian Caffarelli,
I am here.
Vice Chair Chris Brogan,
Here.
Secretary Marlene Batista,
Here.
Jay Gross,
He is not going to be joining us this
Okay.
evening.
Pamela Iacono. Okay. John Matola
I'm here.
and John Wynn.
Yep.
Okay, great.
All right, great. So then next on our agenda for this evening is the pledge. We pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the United States,
United States of America,
to the
and
republic,
to the republic
for
for which it
which it
stands,
stands,
one nation,
one nation,
under God,
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible, with
liberty
liberty
and justice
and
for all.
justice for all.
All right, and then we are going to right into our meeting topic, which is item number 4, to discuss and finalize the governance model, action item 3, which is our first point. Correct, Steve? That's where we're headed first.
Yep.
Okay, so we have received a lot of written submissions, and rather than go through those individually and have people kind of walk them through, I think that what might be most helpful is to kind of take it from the top of the document that we received at our last meeting, and then, have everyone kind of incorporate at the appropriate time when you have something to add or subtract from the appropriate issue, speak up. Steve and I will take note of Jay's submission to try and voice his opinion in his absence today. Correct, Steve? You with me there, Counselor?
I'm here.
I have Jay's
right, so
comments in front of me as well.
Okay, good. All right. Yeah, no, group effort. So more the merrier. I appreciate that, Marlene. So if we want to just, does that work for everyone? Are there any comments from anyone before we get going on that?
That sounds good.
Okay, and then, so in terms of capturing this, I'll be taking some notes too, but I'm going to rely mainly on you, Steve, since you have the document. Does that work?
Absolutely. I
know that
have
Marlene
it all set up for copious notes.
Oh, good, good. I like that. And let me just pull up my version of that document.
Just to make my ease of tracking, since I have several documents open, just what's the title on the one that, Steve, you're going to be using?
It's action item number 3.
Okay, very good.
So you're using from the backup that we received, Steve?
The backup.
No, it was the document from the 24th meeting, action item number 3.
Okay.
The baseline.
What? I'm lost. I'm sorry. What document am I supposed to be looking at?
The one from March 24th, action item number 3, baseline. It's the one you all went through that Steve took you through last week.
There's been no update of the document. It's the same document you had
Okay,
last.
so it's dated March 24th, 2022. It's 40 pages long.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's exactly right, Ron.
Okay, thank you.
That's it.
Just open that. Just bear with, I'm having a technical difficulty here. There we go. Action item number 3. Oh, crap. Okay, I apologize. All right, so
We can't
so
see you,
the
Brian.
first page. What's that?
We can't see you.
Oh, you're probably better off. Does that
Stay off.
work now?
We can hear you, so you can stay
No,
off.
it's not on purpose.
No, we can't see you yet.
I don't know what just happened here. I keep doing this to you all. Say here.
There
Back?
you are.
Okay, good. All right. Thanks, Marlene. So, so on the first page, Article 2.1, I don't think there were any, to my mind, changes suggested in that, correct?
Yeah, the first change I saw, Mr. Chair, was 2.3A.
Okay.
And the makers of the recommended markups, correct me if I'm wrong, I think Chris Brogan had I think it was a pretty editorial, cosmetic recommendation that I've already kind of applied, and that is listing the elected town officials rather than grouping them, that it lays them out. Everybody can see the list. Am I correct on that, Chris?
Yeah, that's right. It was
As
just
opposed to a paragraph.
editorial. Yeah.
Yep. So I did that.
I like that.
I hope it goes this easy all night.
Any other comments on that? Do we want to accept that change?
No, right here.
Oh, John
John.
Matola, there you are.
I'll get into this later, but I'm not thrilled with 27 members of the representative town meeting, so
Oh, I
accept
see.
that.
Oh, gotcha.
No, wait, we're not, yeah, that number's not being accepted.
We're not there yet.
No, no, that would have been too easy.
Wow, we just, good night.
We're all good.
Motion to adjourn?
I wish we
What are you
could.
gonna do with your free evening now?
No, that was not the intent, John. There was no fast one intended there.
I know.
A question on two of the elected bodies here, Zoning Board of Appeals and Board of Assessment Appeals. I would think it might be beneficial to move those to an appointed board rather than elected board. I might not have made that note in my submission, but I realized it afterwards.
All right, so the Zoning Board of Appeals and which was the other one?
The Board
So
of
5
Assessment,
members of the Zoning Appeals.
and the Board of Assessment Appeals as the second body.
Any discussion on that?
I note from one of the grids that Steve had submitted to us, that Attorney Mednick had submitted, that those bodies are sometimes appointed and sometimes elected. And I'm not sure what we beneficially accomplish with having them elected, in that they're not a well-publicized, solicited for office type of position.
Anyone else have any thoughts on that? Oh, John Matola, just speak up, please, because my things
Yeah, all
look
right.
different. I don't see everyone.
I don't think we've really discussed that in any great detail. At this point, I would be wary of changing something like that. So I don't really know what other towns do, and I just haven't heard any outcry that it doesn't work. That's all.
It's Pam Iacono. I'm not sure that we've had enough discussion about that either, that I could make that decision to move them to appointed. I will say on the Board of Assessment Appeals, I had a notation that I'm wondering if we should have a conversation about making that a 7-member board instead of the 5, because at the RTM now twice I've been asked to exercise a portion of, I don't know if I think it's the state statute that says during an appeals year, we're allowed to add members. And I've had to do that twice now sitting on the RTM. So does it make sense just to go ahead and move that from 5 to 7?
Well, I'm sorry, why would, well, one, I agree with other comments. I don't know enough about either of these boards to have much of an opinion. I'm curious, Pam, why did they need to increase the numbers?
Because in the years that they have appeals, there's so many appeals, they haven't had enough people to hear all of the cases. So there's an allowance in the statute to add members, which we've done now twice. So I'm not saying we definitely should do it. Maybe we should reach out to the commission itself, but I don't know. It just, that was the one thing that did stand out to me. Should we just make these other two things? Should we just add the other two people through an election rather than having the RTM appoint the people? So in other words, the people hearing your appeals right now, half of them ran for election, the other half were appointed by the other RTM.
Actually, Pam, what I think happened was in the revow year, which was last year's board, they appointed 4 supplemental members because the volume of appeals was so great. In this current appeal season, which is just concluding now, I believe they appointed 2 supplemental members to complement the 5 elected members. So it
Okay, thank you.
depending on the volume of appeals and whatnot.
Yeah, so maybe we want to leave it alone then.
You don't have to listen to it. I can listen.
And do they
Somebody's
handle?
not on mute. Can someone tell whoever's not on mute, please go on mute.
And so appeals are handled by individual members, not the entire board?
The manner in which they conduct them is a member of the board might hear the taxpayer's appeal, which they would then present to the full board for a decision and vote.
Okay, thank you.
Because there's like meetings every day on the calendar.
Well,
Well, it doesn't sound like there's widespread belief that that's essential. I thought it would be a manner to streamline election process and the charter, but if there's not widespread support, then we can consider it further later and circle back around to make that decision if that's best.
yeah, I mean, honestly, I think, you know, I don't see a compelling or to this point have heard a compelling, you know, reason to change that from elected to appointed. Then we go through kind of who appoints and, you know, I'm not sure that we're, you know, willing, it's something we need to take on. Pam's point about adding members does interest me in the sense that if we constantly have to be appointing them, then maybe something is the matter with the size of that board. Definitely a bit incongruent with what we're trying to do and streamline and downsize government, but so back burner both of these, or?
I would back burner them for now. And to John's point, maybe it is better to have the flexibility for them to add the number that they needed. I forgot that it wasn't 2 and 2. He's right. One year it was 4, the other year it was 2. So I would.
Okay. Any other than number 3 in this paragraph, any other topics to discuss? Being the RTM size. Do we want to take that on now or leave that to the end? I mean, do we want to have a discussion about the size of the RTM now?
I think
You
that
would
and
like
then
to
the
get-
Board of Finance.
Oh,
Do you
sorry.
want to wait till you get to that section, or do you want to?
I'd rather
I
go
think it's
page by page. It's just easier.
All right, so
Right.
we'll just flag that that's not, we're accepting kind of everything except for the amount, right? Which is essentially just changing it to a list format for now. Yep, okay, moving on. Steve, where is the next,
Well, that was the easy one. Can I just say, what are we doing about the constables? Are we staying with the 7? Has that a final decision been made on that? We talked about this early in the process.
I wanted to move
It's
them to appointed and just take them off, but I don't know what the consensus of the commission is.
That, I agree with that.
I also agree with that.
With appointing them?
Yeah,
Who appoints them then?
Yeah, who
the
would do
probate
that?
judge. The probate judge. They work with them.
Attorney Baldwin, do I see your
Do we need
sticker
7?
lighting up there?
Yeah, this is Jim Baldwin. I'm here. I did some research on that I shared with Steve, and I believe that you're limited as to how they can get appointed. But it's clearly something that, in the opinion of the probate court, it would be much preferred. I'm not sure, however, whether the probate court should be the appointing body, but I can dig up that research for you, and we can take care of that pretty swiftly. I think maybe not at this immediate time, unless you want me to.
I'm not totally set on probate appointing them. I just thought that was a logical place. But if there's a statute that says otherwise, that's fine. But I just think we should move it off to an appointment.
Why is that?
I don't see the point in having this on the ballot. You flip it over on the ballot. Why do we have to go through this whole thing? Then they're arguing with one another that each other one's not getting enough work. Just make it an appointment.
Yeah, Jim Baldwin again. The two main points from the probate court were pretty much what Pam just said, which is there are too many for the work that needs to be handed out, and the appointees are not always well versed in what their responsibilities are at the time, and by limiting the number of people to fewer, more like 4, it would help in both situations.
Yeah, but can't constables do more than probate court work? Can't they work for marshals and serve they be process servers and kind of do what the state marshals can do, but just within their own town?
Yeah,
Very limited within their own jurisdiction.
yeah, they can, but as a practical matter, they don't.
But do we need 7? Can it go down to 5? What's the appropriate number?
Yeah, I think that
I'm
the
not well
number
versed in this, so.
recommended by the probate court was
4. 4.
Yeah, but I don't know why we're just listening to the probate court.
Because quite frankly, because they're the only body in town that uses the constables. They're not used by anyone else. Even the tax collector could use constables, but it's not done.
But like private, like state marshals who just work for law firms and stuff, they don't use them?
Not by my experience in town, and by the experience of the constables themselves. I think they'll tell you that they're not used for that purpose.
The only town I know that they're used in towns where there's special act provisions that allow them to serve within the town. Jim's memo, Jim's information, by the way, was incorporated in background document 8, which everybody should have. I think I handed out on March 10th, and it kind of lays it all out. I quote Jim in it, or I refer to Jim in it, and the recommendation was a reduction from 7 to 4, and that a movement from elected to appointed status, so that the appointing authority, which would be the executive, either the first select person or the board of selectmen, if that remains in play, the probate judge really shouldn't be making these appointments. I don't think that's a municipal position, municipal appointment. And that it doesn't say anything about general ability to do work for marshals within their jurisdiction. I'm not aware of any statute.
It's my understanding that
it sounds like the tax collector actually uses state marshals and not the constables. So
that's right. I think they could, but they're just not used for that purpose in the town of Fairfield.
So can we bring it down to 4 as suggested?
I'll bring it to 4 and I'll make it appointed.
By,
If the recommendation is the executive body, then that's fine with me.
and so this will depend on what we do with the Board of Selectmen. So it's either, okay,
I'm just reading, Jim, your backup again. Anyone, so everyone, John Matola, did you have any thoughts on this?
I don't know. I would keep it at 4 and make it elected. I mean, but I don't feel strongly either way. I mean, so if a first select person gets to appoint these people, what's the criteria? Is there, I hate to get into this, is there going to be, appointments from political parties, or does one have to be a Democrat, one has to be a Republican? How does all that work? Because that's the questions we're going to be asked. Whoever the first select person is going to have some authority to appoint somebody who's going to make some money from the probate court. And so why is that better than electing 4 individuals who campaign for it? I don't get it, quite frankly. So I'm willing to have 4 of them to reduce it per the probate court, but have it in an elected position.
That's fine with me. If that moves us along, let's do 4, make it elected, and figure out whatever the minority representation piece is so they don't get all angry.
Yeah, I just think you put a first select person in.
No, that's a good point about the money, John. That's a good point.
Right, that's all.
the 4 elected. I'm not sure minority party representation, I think Jim agrees on this, applies because they're not a board, commission, legislative body, committee, or similar body.
That's okay, Steve. I meant if it was going to be an appointment.
Yep.
That's all.
So we'll leave it as, all right, well, you tell me where you want to go. 4 elected?
But this is Jim Baldwin. Isn't it right now broken down by party? Isn't there a limit as to the number from each party, Steve?
I don't see it in our charter.
There's something that says I think we can run 8, 7 can win. Therefore, there's at least representation. So maybe do 4 and 1, has to be from the other party. Does that solve the problem?
Yeah, that's all right.
Yeah, I think our charter is pretty consistent with minority representation throughout. So that's I think we should stick with that wherever possible.
We're 4-3 right now.
It's 4-3 right now, Marlene?
Yes.
Yeah, so if we did, 3 and 1, then we're good to go.
Okay, that gets you there, Steve, 3 and 1.
I think it can work. Okay.
All right. I
All
feel
right,
great.
so I think I know where you want to go there. I don't think, John Matola had a question about Board of Education, minority representation.
I think, Steve, that was that language that Pam and myself and you were kind of wordsmithing at our last meeting. That's all that. That's what that note meant. I think we were still kind of working on that?
I will continue to work on that. Yep,
You know what we mean, right?
I do.
Okay.
Particularly, it's in the class of 4, not the class of 5.
Yeah.
Am I correct on that?
Yeah, Yes.
Yeah, I think so.
Um,
Okay. Let me see what else I see here from people. Pam had a question on page 5. Oh, okay, that's a question I had. This is in section 4 on justice of the peace. How do we handle our JPs in Fairfield? Pam says there's no ordinance. And the question is, do you elect them or are they appointed? How are they dealt with?
they're
They're
dealt with at the,
And serve a 4-year term. What does that mean? Are
it
they,
happens at the town committee level. I have absolutely no idea how the unaffiliated people get their seats on it.
so there's no they're not on the ballot. They're just nominated by party.
John, right? Is that how you guys do it at the DTC? That's how we do it at the RTC.
I have no idea.
But I know that it's split between, so the Republicans get a certain number, the Democrats get a certain number, and then there's a certain number of unaffiliated. How the unaffiliated people get that seat, I have absolutely no clue.
Who would know the answer?
I don't see any unaffiliated on here.
Who would know
4-year
about
term.
this?
So maybe there's no unaffiliated.
Brian,
Maybe
do
I'm
you-
wrong.
Brian, do you have any
I'm
information on
sorry,
this?
I was stuck on constables. I'm still not happy with that. But what's the topic now? I found a great report
Do
on
you
that.
know, are there unaffiliated,
I'm looking at the list.
justices of the peace?
Yeah, there are. Like, I guess you get on some list and Betsy picks from a lotto when they become available. They're unaffiliated. Yes, there are.
So right now, what is, I guess, TC? Because right now I'm not showing any U's.
Maybe that's the town clerk appointment?
Yeah, that would make sense
Yeah.
based on what I've just cobbled together as an answer.
Well, under
So-
what authority? How
You're
how
on
do
there,
they make
Brian.
that determination?
You know what? Steve,
You're on
you took the words right out of my mouth. I have absolutely no idea.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll call the town clerk.
Maybe she has are you aware of a statute for how justices of the peace are done?
I can tell you all about constables now. Hold on.
Nope, we're on justice of the peace, Mr. Chairman.
He's on the list too.
9-184C, town electors who are not members of a major party.
In the description here, are we on justice of the peace or are we on constable?
No, we're on justices.
Okay. It says the town of Fairfield can have up to 45 justices of the peace, 15 elected by the Republican Party, 15 by the Democratic Party, and 15 unaffiliated/minor party justices, determined by a
What are you reading
lottery
from?
system
What are you
administered
reading
by
from
the
the-
town of Clark on the Fairfield webpage
Website.
for justice of the peace. It's a 4-year term. The
That
next
sounds
term comes up
familiar.
in 2025. And Brian, your name is on there.
No, I think I just said that's how it works. Yeah, I am a justice of the peace, but you don't have to call me Your Honor.
So we
There's a
don't
new
know
fact
in the charter
tonight.
on page 5 what this language means when it says as provided in the general statutes and by ordinance.
Correct. And I asked the town clerk, because she's the keeper of our code, what's the ordinance? And she said, I don't know. I don't know why that's in there.
look at the statute. 9-1.
And she has recommended language also, I see.
She does, yes. Unless we're missing the step where we were supposed to do an ordinance and we never did.
Maybe I'll call her. Is that okay?
Yes, please.
All right.
And they're determined by a lottery system.
I just want to make sure that saying that we're doing it as provided by general statutes is all we need to say. And if the town clerk has it under control, that's all I care about.
So we can't go less than 15, right?
It just says up to 45.
The law says, yeah. Are we looking at changing the number of them?
No, we're just trying to figure out why it says and by ordinance.
This is Jim Baldwin. I could tell you that editor's note to section 4.2 of the town code, former section 4.2 election of justices of the peace has been superseded by section 7.2 of the charter. So whatever was once said in the ordinance is now just controlled by that section of the charter.
Which is this section now. 7.2 is the section we're looking at, Jim. We've moved it out of that chapter into here, the establishment clause.
Yeah.
Got it. All right. So I'm not sure what it means by ordinance. Maybe that was.
I think that the ordinance, I suspect it was passed rescinding that, and it was never.
All right, so we can take that language out.
It wasn't changed in the charter.
All right. Okay.
Okay.
All right. The next, I want to jump over the minority representation section. Do we want to discuss vacancies?
Attorney Mednick, I had stuff on page 5 related to the.
I thought I got it.
The elected town officials.
Okay.
So when I spoke with the town clerk, she said that that's still confusing, and that she would prefer that it said the 4th Monday in November.
One second.
I sat down with her and she showed me on the calendar. I see where the confusion is coming from.
All right. So this is the commencement of terms, subsection C. Okay.
Right.
That's yep. So tell me what she would like.
She would like it to read the 4th Monday of November. She said that'll take all the questioning out of it. She said the word after their election is causing confusion.
I took that out.
And even well, this says on the 3rd Monday, unless I'm missing something, this says on the 3rd Monday in November after their election and qualification and shall continue until their successors.
Oh, I took that language out after the last meeting because I thought we agreed to take it out. So that's not in the copy you have, but that language is no longer, I took the after the election language out and left it.
Okay.
Would it, if it simply said 3rd Tuesday, Monday in November without that language, is it a problem?
I don't think so. I think it's that after the election. So she said
I took that language out.
She said to me that make it the 4th Monday.
Yeah, I thought we had agreement after the last meeting that language, that was the problematic language.
Okay. So I think that fixes it then.
All right. Very good.
If those words are coming out.
It's gone.
Okay.
This is Jim Baldwin again. If I remember, I think John Matola might have had made the point that it was also confusing or potentially confusing because it's only in the year that there is an election. And
Correct.
he thought maybe that's why, but is it sufficient to understand that from the context of the of that section that it's obviously in the year where there is an election?
Yeah, if you look at the opening sentence, terms of all elected, of office of all elected town officials declared elected, presumably in the year of election,
Great.
qualified hereunder shall commence on.
Perfect.
So now it reads on the third Monday in November and shall continue until.
Yeah. Yep.
And do you need that and qualified at the end?
It's standard language
Okay.
that's used in this context.
Yep.
Um, 2.4, Jim and I have a number of little issues that we have to discuss. I just wanted to leave that section bolded to figure it out how it applies throughout to make sure that it's needed. And then the next big section, although several of you addressed it, I was putting it off to so after we were done with the heavy issues, is I wanted to walk through the vacancy section. Jim, this is one of the sections I wanted to walk through with you and maybe the town clerk, and then try to come in with some ideas. Does anybody have objection, or does everybody think it works well the way it works right now?
So are you specific to section A, which is
Generally?
That's with respect to the RTM?
Well, section 2.6A is generally with respect to the Board of Selectmen.
Oh, okay.
In respect to the RTM.
And the RTM, yeah.
Well, I could tell you that the procedures for filling vacancies on the RTM are working very well. We haven't had any issues with that.
Pam, could you just explain how that works? Because I'm not
Sure.
that familiar
So
with it.
once you've been elected to office and you're serving in a district, if during your term you resign your seat and you live in District 1, then the sitting members of District 1 vote to appoint a new member.
From the same political party, right?
Correct. They have to be from the same political party. So if the seat is held by a Republican and it has to be filled by a Republican.
So that's really subsection E, 2.6E, which is resignation vacancies on the RTM.
D.
Right?
I think it's subsection D.
Resignation and
Maybe right, because it looks like we eliminated a provision. You're right, it is D.
Yep.
And that works.
Yeah, and the only thing I will say on the D part is D4. Instead of this, the town clerk shall cause notice of the meeting to be delivered to each member not less than 3 days before the set time in the meeting. That really should just be cleaned up to say properly notice a meeting.
That's your comment number 4?
Yes.
Okay.
Jim Baldwin here again. There were changes made to the FOI Act, which speaks to this and allows for electronic transmission, and maybe we want to look to that statute for guidance and mirror what it says there in some way.
Yeah, that's fine with me. That's why I just use the words properly notice a meeting, but however lawyer speak is for that, it's fine.
Well, what we're going to probably do, and gotta wait till we get a few more things done. I'm going to work on a definition section, and I'm going to deal with the issue of notice, a FOIA notice, updated FOIA notice in a definition, so we don't have to repeat the standard every time we talk about it. I'll have it in and try to develop a defined term, but that's what we're trying to do here, is basically have her give proper legal notice. Right?
Yes.
All right.
And can I just, on this section, when you guys like finalize language, or Steve does, give us another chance to look at it, because
Yeah.
I didn't really look at it. I have my notes, need to review still, anticipating that Steve was going to do a little more work on this. So that's all.
Yeah, this section I was punting because I wanted to understand it. I didn't fully understand it. My hope is after tonight's meeting is I will give you an updated red line.
Yep.
Because I didn't think we did. Obviously, there was something I took out for my own purposes because I knew I thought we had agreed on taking that clause out. But I have not done an update since I handed the document in last week or 2 weeks ago. All right. I'll take a look at the rest of these sections to make sure that they work. Let's see, page 9, resigning from office. You have a note, Pam, on resigning from office?
Just that if the event that we do decide to go in the direction of eliminating the Board of Selectmen, you have to figure out who the town clerk resigns to. So I don't know if that's the first select person or how that commission wants to handle that. Obviously, she can't resign to herself.
Let's hope that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it. All right. Now, procedures for town RTM elections. So the town clerk confirmed that this is what she uses?
That's what she told me, yes.
Hey, Steve, before we get there,
Yeah.
in 2.7, we had talked at some point about having some sort of tie-breaking provision.
Yeah.
And I think you had suggested other towns did this, unless I'm thinking of a different clause.
What kind of provision?
Some kind of, if there's a tie, there's a tie-breaking provision. And I don't know what happened. Maybe they get a third party in there or something like that.
Yeah, I actually wasn't looking at it here. I was looking at the tiebreaker for even numbered, particularly the even numbered RTM for organizational purposes.
Well,
I think that's what.
Here you have an equal number.
isn't it
There's
the
no
clause
tie-
like in prior, I mean, I know this is a sensitive topic every time it comes up, but in prior years, we've actually gone to court over this thing.
Yep.
So should we try and put something in here to at least avoid that?
Let me look and see how other towns deal with it, because they usually, maybe you should have redistricting committee that's split evenly between the two parties with a unaffiliated voter as chair. As the tiebreaker, I don't know. I mean, it's, let me see how that's done. That's not where I was coming up with it, but.
Okay.
Jim, you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm just wondering in what context we're talking about a tie exactly. Are we talking about not in a resignation? Where are we looking at
Sorry,
that?
we're
This
on
is in reapportionment of
2.7.
voting districts where you have an even number of people on the redistricting group.
Got it.
Wait, does the ordinance give any context to that?
Who sits on, is it simply the council on your redistricting or the
It's two
RTM?
members of the RTM. So two
So
from
you
the
don't have
majority
an
party and
independent reapportionment committee. You have the RTM does it completely.
correct.
So there's an ordinance that governs this. Is that what I'm understanding?
That is correct.
And so that does not deal, so that tells us that there's two members from the minority and majority parties and it doesn't allow. So do we need to put a tiebreaker in here or would that be more appropriate to put in the ordinance?
Honestly, I don't know. Maybe we could just earmark this and come back to it.
Let me just
Because, I mean,
point out for the record
it doesn't
that
specify in here that makeup that you're referring to.
let me point out that this section seems to be derived, and Jim will correct me if I'm wrong, from the special acts. And because most towns have independent reapportionment committees to do reapportionment, they ultimately go to the legislative body, but yours seems to originate within the body and to be approved by the complete body, I assume.
That is correct.
Yeah, and it's special act. I don't know if it's worked all the time, but
No, it did not work. It worked last time. We're still in the process right now, but in 20, I don't know what year, 14, we went to court on it. Not the last one, but the one before that.
There's 10%, the deviation not to exceed 10%. Brian, you're at the state level and just gone through reapportionment. What is the standard, on deviation?
It's not 10%. I don't recall off the top of my head. I didn't do that.
Yeah, because this is, I mean, it's a special act, but it predates the one person, one vote rulings of the Supreme Court.
So you think now it's supposed to be as even as possible?
That's high.
It's a high number, yeah.
So 10% is high?
Yeah.
Steve, if this was eliminated from the charter, then we would have to follow state statute, right?
Yes,
And what does state statute say on this issue?
I'd have to look at it. I've not dealt with it because
Okay.
most of my charters have had longstanding provisions. We've moved around things in much more elaborate than this in terms of having a committee, and it's a relatively non-political process, candidly. But I didn't think this was going to be an issue here. I've not looked at this section, frankly. I think I'll take a look at it.
Okay.
All right. Okay. All right, so everybody's telling me that the procedures for the RTM elections are followed. We'll leave it. I'll take the green off and all that will be there. And the procedures as well as the procedures for tied elections.
I asked the town clerk about this. In my time, I don't ever remember that happening. She couldn't recall that happening either. So neither of us were really certain whether or not they work because nobody's experienced it. It's not to say it hasn't happened. We didn't, I didn't ask her to go back in the vault and figure it out, but.
All right. It's also special act. If it's not broke, we'll leave it. You had some other things in here. Let me just take a quick look here. Page 11, number 4, delete the words by mail. What else is in that sentence? Because my pages are just slightly off from yours.
Let's see. The town clerk shall, upon receipt of such lists, notify all members by mail. She said just delete the words mail. By mail, just leave it as all members.
What's the header of the section?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's B, election.
Okay, got it. How's she going to do it?
Well, I just wrote in, and this was just me making up words, was shall properly notice a meeting. I took properly notice to being by following the FOI rules, but if there's, language that you and Attorney Baldwin want to work on that makes all of that consistent, it's fine by me. But we don't send anything through snail mail anymore.
Or this is just noticing people of their election. Okay.
Yep, and
So it's giving them
now
notice of their election. Is that basically it?
Yeah, and she just sends us an email.
Got it. Yeah, because the definition I've been coming up with on notice deals with electronic means. All right.
Yeah, so whatever the legality is around that, I don't know what it is, but it doesn't have to. She doesn't do anything by mail per se.
And that's done. That's in another section as well. Here it is, be mailed. Okay, I got it.
Yeah, page 12, number 3.
I got it. I found it. All right.
One more point there, Steve. This, especially the beginning part, is the nomination. Is that the same for all elected provisions in town? I think I look back at the current charter and I don't think I saw a nomination provision. So I assume
This is only for, yeah, that's why I had this whole section in green. Is in my experience, most nominations and elections are handled by Title IX. But if the town clerk is saying that they follow this procedure, which has its origins in a special act, right? Yep.
So this is different than Title IX?
Yeah, Title IX is the Connecticut General Statutes.
Right.
I don't think they're that different, but if this is the way they've been conducting elections for the RTM, see, I think this probably dates back to, the post-town meeting era. This is 1947. It's 10 years before the Home Rule Act came into play, and they put these procedures in place and have kept them. The General Statutes covers all of this territory, but again, I don't want to do something in the charter that disrupts what the town clerk has done unless it's been ruled unconstitutional for some reason. And I'm not sure there's any
I have
such
no
ruling.
objection to this. Like, if it's different than, and even a little bit from the statutes, it's fine. My point was somebody reading this, wanting to be on an unaffiliated, trying to get on the zoning board, they're going to flip through the charter. They're not going to see anything that says I can get a petition to get on the zoning board. But then again, that's true of everybody, so they have to go read the statute, I guess is the answer.
For selectmen, yeah, it's true of many of the offices. They just go to the general statutes.
Okay.
Right. All right, so then we're moving into RTM. So you want to talk about 27? This is the place to do it.
Sure.
Do you want me to reiterate my rationale for what I
That'd
did?
be
Or
helpful.
does
Yeah, if
everybody
you want to
understand
frame
it?
that again. Yeah, why don't you frame that again and then we can open it up.
Yeah, so we've been having this discussion for several months now, and there's been a lot of public participation, and a lot of emails that have been received by the CRC from the public, including several in the last few days, talking about the number of districts in town, as well as the number of members of the RTM that would create a duly representative entity. And so going through that discussion based on, my review of other charter provisions in other towns, and again, I don't ever make the argument that just because another town has something, it's something you should have, but it does give you a point of comparison. That 40 is a large number. It's not as large as Darien with 100. It's not as large as Greenwich with 230, but it's still a substantial number of people serving on the local legislative body for a town your size. Just for comparative sake, the Board of Representatives in Stamford is 40 members, the large city. The New Haven Board of Alders is 30. Those are two of the larger communities with larger legislative bodies. And so if it's a function of numbers being more representative, New Haven should probably have 90 or 110 members of the Board of Alders. And so what I thought, since a lot of the discussion was moving through the argument of where you are now, which is 40, although that's not the max, you're entitled to go up to 56 under your charter. And some people who had been arguing for a smaller RTM, maybe as small as 15, I came up with the concept of something that was somewhere in the middle, 27. I recognized the critical importance of the 10 districts. In fact, about 3 meetings ago, I kind of conceded the point that it looks like 10 districts is where we should be, because that seems to be a strong consensus in the town, although I'm not hired to determine your consensus. And I decided that an odd number made sense. There's a number of people who argue that it makes no difference whether it's odd or even. Robert's rules says if you have an even vote, it loses. My bigger concern is not the day-to-day votes, because you win and lose on votes, creating ordinances or approving contracts or whatever it is you're doing in the legislative body. My concern about the even number of the body had to do with organization. And I suggested last week that if you have an even numbered body, you're going to have to figure out who is the tiebreaker for purposes of organizing it. And what I mean by that, it's the role that's played by the vice president in the Senate, which is an even numbered body, the role played by the president of the Senate in Hartford, or the lieutenant governor, frankly. The lieutenant governor would be the tiebreaker in the state Senate in Hartford. And so you need a tiebreaker somewhere, and there's no deputy first selectman who sits or presides. So if it's an even numbered body, my recommendation, you have to come up with some kind of tiebreaker mechanism, if for no other reason than for the organization of the entity. So you can go either way on the argument of odd or even. I kind of fall on the side of odd members for the reason I just stated, not for the day-to-day governance, but for the organization of the body. And that could be easily resolved other ways. So that's the way I came up with the 27. Again, you can see from those who have been writing to the CRC that there's a real strong embrace of the 40 and the 10 districts. Again, I don't know how representative that is of the general population. I'll leave it to the 7 of you to decide that, but that was the rationale for the 27 members in the 9 districts.
Okay. Does anyone want to go first?
I'm happy to provide a perspective. And it's a perspective gained from the significant amount of work that was done during the strategic planning process, one in which we interfaced with, hundreds up to thousands of residents here in town. And a frequently observed comment was, I don't really know what the RTM does. I don't see my RTM rep. I don't really know who they are. I don't really know what the body does. Separately, as part of that work, we tried to engage with the RTM and have the RTM participate in the planning process, hosting meetings, and largely it was felt that there wasn't an interest in doing that for quite a number of the RTM districts that were in place at that point in time. So as part of the work that we did, the question came up about, well, how effective is the RTM? And many of the meetings that have occurred on a variety of different topics demonstrate the difficulty in managing a body of that size and efficiently and effectively having, good decisions made, good work being done. It just seems to be a bit unruly, and also interfacing with a role that pretty much many people here in town agree with as far as professional management, having that professional manager, whatever we call that individual, being able to take guidance and input from a body that large just seems to be a very difficult undertaking. So I'll stop there and allow other people to weigh in and provide a perspective. But it just seems to be an overly complex, unruly number to execute efficient and effective governance of the town.
Okay, John Matola.
Yeah, I'll give it a go. I think if you keep it at 27 and 9, you're gonna lose charter reform and revision. I don't think the public's going to agree to go in this direction. I think that it's really the prerogative under our charter of the RTM to determine its size. I mean, we can put a limit like we have in our charter right now, which is 56. And at some point over the years, the RTM agreed to reduce it to 40 members. I think reducing this to 27 or even down to what some members suggested in their comments to 20 or 19 is just a significant jump that just won't, I don't think the public is going to agree with that. I mean, we have 10 districts right now, very distinct areas of town that are all different, and they appreciate their representation. And, I think the body's been effective. Is it sloppy sometimes? Yes, that's the legislative process. That's what happens. But that's government. It's like that in the state level. It's like that at the federal level. So I just think we have to be very wary of that. I don't know why in our charter we would limit the number of districts, because I think, again, that's an RTM prerogative when they do reapportionment. And I thought one of the things we discussed in charter revision as a whole is that we want to put those big, important things in our charter, those sacrosanct things that we deem very, very important, because if you start putting everything in the charter, when you want to make a change,
right,
you can't. You're going to have to do charter revision again. And that's a concern to me. At some point, if we have in our charter that we're going to have 9 districts or 10 districts or whatever the amount is, we're stuck with that. And we can only change it through charter revision. So I would like to leave that to the purview of the representative town meeting. Now, with that said, I personally, my view is that I could live with a RTM if it's 10 districts with 3 members each. That does reduce it from 40 to 30. I think that's a gradual step. I know Steve mentioned the tiebreaker issue. I don't really see that as a huge concern, but I guess we should deal with it if we go in that direction. I mean, to me, that would be a compromise that I think we could move this whole charter revision forward. And if you have 30 members with a strong committee structure, which we have language right now in the proposed charter proposals, you can have a very effective representative town meeting at the 30 number and still keep a concept that Fairfielders are familiar with. I think one of the other big things that we said at the beginning of this is we have to understand our culture as a municipality and what we're used to doing. And we are used to having an RTM that at one point had 56 members, now has 40 members. And I just think trying to reduce that to 27 or 20 members is a recipe for any meaningful charter reform to be defeated at the polls. I think you're going to get a very vocal opposition to something like this, which would, I just think we wouldn't be able to do some of the really good things that I see in this document right now. Because if that's going to be the focus of any opposition to this, we're going to lose some of the things that I think all of us agree are good things, like the COO, maybe eliminating the Board of Selectmen, which I think all of us tend to agree is something that we want to do, or at least go in that direction. So that's my concern. I mean, and I respect all of your viewpoints, but I think, my opinion is the focus should be 10 districts, 3 members per district, and then let's see how it works. And the RTM could revisit this in a few years. So those are my thoughts. Thanks.
Just to follow up on one of the points that you made, John, how would we instill the responsibility in the RTM for their effective execution, planning, the thing that you mentioned, which I think is one of the challenges of a larger group, whether we have a larger group or one that is more streamlined, how do we ensure that that management protocol is put into place in the RTM so we don't wind up in several years in the same place where we are now, which we all agree is suboptimal?
Yeah, I get it, John. So here, I'm going to tell you how. And my biggest fear would be this. We get rid of the Board of Selectmen, and then we have an RTM that is ineffective and can't be the check that we need for the first select person's office. We all agree we need that. The way you do that, and I think we have some language in our provisions here, is by a strong committee structure of our legislative body. Most municipalities, and Steve, you can chime in on this, do have a committee structure. They'll have committees that, budget and appropriations committees, ordinance committees, Parks and Rec type committees. There are members of the entire body that are members of those particular committees, and they focus on those particular issues and do the hard work, and then report back to the full body about what they want to do and what they've done, and in that process they are able to do what they need to do to have an effective legislative body and do the things that we all want a legislative body to do. I agree right now, the way the RTM is structured, they may not do some of those things. And I haven't been on the RTM in a few years, so maybe I'm not speaking out of line a little bit here. But I think with a little smaller RTM from 40 to 30, with a strong committee structure, you can do those things that you want to do as a legislative body. You could have, they can really dive into the budget, which is one of their duties. They can draft and dive into ordinances, which I don't think they do enough of that work right now. Those types of things. You got to have a contracts committee that reviews contracts that are proposed and brought from the first select person's office for approval to the RTM. A lot of municipalities do it that way. I'll defer to Steve on that. I think he'll agree with me that, that is a very effective way to have a legislative body. I don't know, Steve, you want to comment?
Yeah, my finger's up. Thank you, Mr. Chair, may I?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, the way I crafted the language, and I'm not saying it's perfect, we'll look at it and we'll make it work better, is I think one of the people who testified was the first selectman of Branford, and he talked about their committee structure, their committee process. I went back and looked at their charter and found that the charter is silent on their vaulted committee process. So what I tried to do here is, most charters do refer to committees, but I have a section, subsection 4 under this section that, because right now you say that the RTM shall have the power to create committees. And what I've done here is expanded on that. And it basically says that they should have committees that have basically have broad jurisdiction on the issues that are before the town. I don't get specific. I think the rules should establish the committees, but it says that you need to go through a committee in order to act on anything that comes to the RTM. And I wanted to try to establish a mechanism here. I mean, if you guys think otherwise, and we could maybe talk to members of the RTM about it, I would be reluctant to establish the committees. I do allow for a prophylactic, to allow for a bypass of a committee with a two-thirds vote of the entire membership of the RTM. Have to be a supermajority of the entire membership of the 30 or 40 member RTM, and or 27 member, whatever you decide on, and then matters of public emergency that may be under the general statutes as well. But it really does focus on that. It also talks, and one of the issues we need to talk about, I don't think anybody was thrilled with the way I dealt with the appointment of committees, but we can get to that in a few minutes. The other point that's important in that regard is a real reliance on having standing rules, and I've read the standing rules now, and they're pretty good standing rules of the RTM, but have real strong open meeting and public comment provisions in the charter, so that, again, it may be part of your culture already, but I have been finding more and more towns mandating. Bridgeport, I know, has public comment. New Haven does not. Hartford does. Other places do. Hamden does. Depends on the town. But I thought having that standard in there also was a pretty important standard for, and it's for meetings and committee meetings, so that it does allow for that as well. So, you know, I think that short of actually naming the committees or subject areas for committees in the charter, which I've not seen, although I have seen it in the Midwest. I think that's awfully draconian to go that far to actually list the committees. But I think it's strong, and we could look at the language to make it tougher if we need to.
Does that answer your, Marlene?
Pam, how many committees do we have? Remind us, how many committees do we have right now, and how many people of the 40 serve on a committee on the RTM?
So the way that it works right now is we have 5 committees, and everyone is assigned to a committee.
Okay.
I'm just, you know, and I'll stop talking after this last statement for now. I'm just, you know, I'm very wary of consolidating power and fewer people in Fairfield. I think we should try to not do that. It's not what our town's about. I think it's unnecessary. I think we do a lot of terrific things, and we do a lot of good things, and there isn't anything so drastically broken with Fairfield government to make such a significant change of reducing our legislative body from, you know, 40 to 27 or down to 20. It's just unnecessary. And And I think the one thing that we all kind of agreed on that maybe we can do without is the Board of Selectmen, you know, based on, you know, what we've learned about that particular board. But I don't see that the legislative process is so broken that we need to reduce it that significantly, the number. And I understand at times it can be a little, as I said, sloppy, but that's okay. That's what government's all about. And, you know, I can list, like I did 3 or 4 meetings ago, all the good things about Fairfield. We're AAA credit rating. We got $40 million in fund balance. We have great schools and great recreational opportunities for everyone. Our tax increases have been right around 2% per year. That's all good stuff. That doesn't require just a big drastic change to our government. But I'm certainly open to tweaking our government and our charter to make it better. And I just think my fear is reducing the number of members down to, you know, 27 or 20 members kind of defeats that purpose. And I think you're going to get a lot of pushback from the public, you know, once they start focusing on this. So I'll shut up now. I've talked too long, so thanks for hearing me out.
You haven't talked too long at all, but Marlene.
Thank you, John Matola. Steve, you mentioned something about public comment. I don't know how much public comment we allow for at the RTM meetings when it's not related to a agenda item. Pam, maybe you can talk a little bit to that.
We don't allow any public comment on an item unless it's on the agenda for a vote.
So
In my provision deals with items on the agenda, I believe.
So Marlene, the way it works right now is when we're in a committee meeting, we hear presentations and then we break out into 5 committees.
Yep.
It's at the discretion of each chairman of that committee whether or not they'll allow public comment.
Okay.
Very rarely are members of the public at a committee level meeting. They are from time to time, but they're more or less, most members of the public tend to go to the main meeting. And the main meeting of the RTM,
which hopefully will be back in person someday soon.
Believe me, I can't take another day on a computer. And then the main meeting, the items that are up for a vote, the moderator takes public comment on those items.
I just wanted to get clarification. Thank you, Pam.
Let me clarify something I just said. In the language I've drafted, which may be too specific, but it was intended to be, if it's a standing special committee meeting, it's only items on the agenda. If it's a regular meeting, it would be any item on the agenda or any other matters concerning the town. And that's the full meaning of the RTM that are within the purview of the RTM. You might make the other matters within the discretion of the chair or something like that. And also this doesn't mean that people can go on for all evening. There would be normally an allocated time for public comment.
Yeah, it's like 2 or 3 minutes.
Yeah. So I just wanted to clarify that. Just for guidance, does anybody else have any thoughts on size? We've heard from
Pam.
Sure. Personally, I don't see the difference between 27 and 32. I mean, 27 and 30. I don't think that that's going to cause a problem in the public. It's 3 people. I think that the general population, the electorate outside of the political circles, that I don't see that being argumentative. What is intriguing to me about the 27, which I had never considered before it was raised, was the odd number. It hadn't occurred to me, and having just gone through a 2020 RTM, the thought of getting an odd number is appealing to me. I think it would be appealing to the electorate. All of our other bodies are odd numbers. We're the only even body in the entire town. So to me, it's a logical argument to go to an odd number body. Obviously, I would prefer that that was a smaller number, because I do think that we should have more of a checks and balances, and to make a stronger RTM. I'm not looking to consolidate power in any particular body. I'm looking for those checks and balances. But I agree with Commissioner Wynn. I'm worried that we're going to have such a large number of people, with so many people on these committees, that it's still unwieldy. And you know, if the compromise number is an odd number, I think that's a much better number to go to the public with. Second piece of it that nobody's addressed, which I had never known about before through this process, and believe me, I learned a lot. I think this has been a fascinating talk, is minority representation. It never occurred to me before. In fact, I didn't even really know that. Well, I definitely didn't know. We had a special act that allowed for us to do what we're doing. So why should it be winner take all in one district? I don't think that it should, now that I've had this conversation and heard from all of these different entities and thought about it, and the fact that the state's statute is not for winner take all. So to me, that even though it's not the lower number that I was looking for to go with what we're, in the direction that, we were going to go, I could settle for an odd number in the minority representation piece. It just doesn't, respectfully to Commissioner Mottola, 30-27, you're splitting hairs. I'd rather take the odd number. So I'd go lower, but I understand there's a lot of consternation. People are very leery of it, and but I think there's an argument to be had there. I think that we haven't heard from the general public. I think we've heard from a lot of people who are insiders to all of this. And I mean that respectfully. They have a lot of great things to offer. But I think if you were to go talk to the general person on the street, that they're not going to tell you there's a difference between 27 and 30. And I think personally that they would be more inclined to go with the makeup of all of our other bodies, which are odd numbers.
Okay, Steve.
Let me correct the record on something. A couple weeks ago, I made a statement that I thought that there may be an issue with the composition of the RTM under the Minority Party Representation Statute, and I was mistaken. The statute does require minority party representation in at-large situations. So if you have an at-large body, it absolutely applies. When you have a district system, it does not apply. And the issue I proposed, the way I proposed it, is you can, of course, have a stricter standard than the statutory standard. You can't go to a looser standard. And as I've indicated, different places have dealt with this in different ways. Waterbury, which is a very strong one-party town, placed minority party representation in their 5 districts so that one of the seats would be from the non-majority party in each district. And my thinking in Fairfield, I think I explained this, was that it's a relatively competitive political town, and having this structure not only makes it easier for the political parties, both political parties, to be represented throughout town, even in a minority capacity, but may make it easier for a petitioning unaffiliated voter who may want to serve on the RTM to actually get elected to the RTM by beating one of the minority parties, the minority party in that district, to have a chance to get on RTM. Right now, it would be virtually impossible for very difficult for somebody to break through that system. And so that was one of the reasons I had suggested that, because of the political composition of the town being relatively even. I know the numbers are about 4,000 apart, and the unaffiliated is at the higher end of the two parties. But that was the rationale for it. But I wanted to point out that I was not right about the statute.
So I'm not sure I follow what's the bottom line? You're saying to us that the statute, under your view now, doesn't apply to an RTM that is elected on a geographical basis?
It's a legislative body, whether it's an RTM or not. It's any legislative body. If you're an at-large elected body, the statute does apply. If you're a district-based body, it does not apply.
And where do you read that from?
The minority party representation statute.
Yeah, I'm looking at it. I'm just wondering if you...
Hold on, let me get it up there.
So there's been a lot of people writing in. They're just snipping little parts of the statute and quoting it for their kind of proposition, but not reading it holistically, which is, I'm finding to be a bit, troubling. I think that there's a lot of misconception out there about this. Some people just believe it doesn't apply to any RTM, which I don't read this to say.
That RTM provision deals with unconsolidated cities. Hamden, Fairfield is not an unconsolidated community.
Yeah.
But I'm reading the exceptions, and one of the exceptions is where the members of any board, commission, committee, or body whose members are elected wholly or partially on the basis of a geographic district, division of the state, or political subdivision, as the political subdivision. So if it's a district-based body, it's exempt from minority party representation. It has nothing to do with that RTM provision that was being cited on the chat.
All right. Well, regardless, I think it's worth talking about. It was something that I had never thought about before, and I just wonder, why it should be winner take all. If for all the reasons that Steve just said, I'd never given that any consideration before, and I think it's worth consideration. I also think, given the fact that unaffiliated voters are the majority party per se, I think that they would find that appealing.
By the way, the exception is for town meetings, because you can't control who comes to a town meeting. Whoever shows up, shows up. So minority party representation doesn't govern in a town meeting. So if you want to have winner take all, go back to a town meeting session. That's where it's not regulated. You can't possibly regulate a town meeting on the basis of minority party representation rules. Just want to point that out for the record.
So minority representation then would apply to us. Is that what you're saying? Because we're not a town.
No. If you have districts, it does not apply.
That's right. Okay.
Your RTM is bona fide.
Yeah.
It is legal. It is bona fide. There's nothing wrong with the RTM.
Everything, okay, perfect.
But I had suggested a stricter standard in my proposal to you for your consideration, because of the perception, right or wrong, and I'm not from town, so you will make your decisions, that that it would allow for representation in each of the districts by each of the parties, and maybe allow more access to somebody who is not in a party that decides to petition to run for the RTM.
So,
John, yeah.
I guess all I'd say about that is, I don't think it's necessary to do that in Fairfield. I can see why it might have been necessary in Waterbury. I mean, over the last 10, 15 years, we've had representative town meetings controlled by Republicans and then flipped by Democrats. So there's been a back and forth over the years without any one party necessarily dominating these electoral cycles. And I just think a pure representative town body district composition, that the top vote getters should be the ones who serve, be it the top 4 or top 3. I mean, you may have a point if for the last 20 years the Democrats have ruled, for example, the RTM, but it hasn't happened that way. You know, we've gone back and forth on numerous occasions over the last several years.
No, but
which is a good thing.
Oh, can I just, I know Chris, well, Chris, you have a
I'm sorry,
comment. Were you done, John? I'm sorry.
Yes, I am. I'm done.
I did want to respond to that, but Chris has a comment first.
No, I was going to go back to the whole question. So go ahead if you have a specific.
Yeah, no, I mean, so in terms of that, I agree with you, John, in the sense that the makeup, when you look at the RTM as a whole, has changed and gone back and forth, which is healthy. But there are certain districts that have always been all Republican or all Democrat. And maybe that's not healthy because we have established here that everyone seems to understand and agree that Fairfield's made up of a bunch of different, unique communities, and that's why the preference is to remain having an RTM elected by geographical district. And those geographical districts within the town as a whole have been shut out to any representation. So, there's 2 or 3 that come to mind that if you're a Republican, you're never going to get elected. And if you're a Democrat, you're never going to get elected. And so how does that play out? Maybe there is some room for, pondering that part of it. I don't know.
And if you're unaffiliated, you don't even get a chance to run in the election.
That's not true.
Well, it's a difficult, steep hill to climb, if I understand it correctly.
I mean, we had
Well,
one
you could,
on the last time.
right.
You petition on,
Yeah,
right?
you can petition on, which has happened twice. And I could tell you in both those instances in 2 different districts, it's darn near impossible for that person to come close to somebody who's in a registered party.
Right.
Oh yeah, they don't win. Yeah. No, yeah.
And Commissioner Caffarelli, I agree with you. Why should any one party own a district, for lack of a better way to say it? That really gave me something to think about.
Chris, we're gonna.
Well, I guess I will comment on this one since we're on it. I don't view it as winner take all. It's you have to get the votes. So the top five or 4 now vote getters get in. And in fact, when I was on the RTM and I was in a district that was supposedly for all one party, somebody on the other party got in one year. And so it happens. I think also if there is an unaffiliated voter who is the voters really want there, I mean, it's a pain, but that's true on all our elected positions. They can get on, and the thing about having the districts, it's a small enough area that if somebody really wants to work it and they have some traction in the area, they'll get on. But I wouldn't look at it I look at it as the voters expressing what they want to do. I guess on an overall basis, I think, now I'll go back, if I can, to my regular comments on the whole thing. I think I would kind of favor in a smaller body. I do think if we go the way we're going, it's going to have a lot more responsibility, a lot more power, and I think it's going to take a lot more dedication. I think it's going to be a lot more work. And I think, one, in terms of just getting people, qualified people to be running for office, and then also for the dedication it's going to need. My sense as a smaller body, I'm not sure, I think this is more gut than anything else, and partly is compromise, partly is what might the voters accept. I think around 30 is about right. And I guess I back into that a little bit by the districts. I wouldn't shrink the districts by the charter. We have it, it's working. It's been there for a while, I know, not forever. I think maybe the language could be current to the current charter language, that would be no more than 10 districts and maybe no more than 30 members, which still gives power within the RTM to change it in the redistricting committee if they want to do that. But I do think a smaller body would probably be more responsive to the responsibilities that it's going to be given if we go the way we're going in the charter now. And I think with that, if we have 10 districts, I think we get a balance because the town is balanced. It has been it has been. And I think that kind of takes care of the minority party representation. So I personally wouldn't go for that, but I would support, I guess I go 30 member in 10 districts with language that's a maximum.
Okay. That's a fair point. In terms of the, it's not, it's not a winner take all. So, where are we? Let's see here. What about Jay Gross? Does he have any comments on this, Steve?
I was just looking
I
for
was
his
just going to
comments.
read his.
Oh, okay,
He
Marlene,
is,
that'd be great.
9 districts. He's suggesting possibly 10 districts with 2 reps with 1 at large for 21 if we stay at 10 districts.
Okay.
And where was he at 9? He had a comment there about 9. I think he was 9, 18, and 1.
For 9 districts, 1 at large for 19. A 3-person district would have all the same problems and issues as a 3-person board of selectmen, which is so that then he suggests which is widely acknowledged as less than ideal. So alternatively, he would support retaining 10 districts with 2 reps with 1 at large for 21. And of course, increasing the strength of the legislative body.
I think we're in agreement with that. Hey Pam, does anyone know, do all of our districts seem to have the deviation was in that prior charter provision, but is the makeup generally the same, the population? That's what you're working on, is that?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
Yeah.
The numbers.
Yeah. The population of each district.
Oh, are they all within the 10% deviation?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, we have to do that by ordinance. That's what it says. So we work on that when we do the redistricting. So we accomplished that at the last change, and then we'll accomplish that when this process that's ongoing is changed, because that's how it's written in the ordinance. I mean by charter, actually. Sorry.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's how we do our work, figuring out that deviation. That's our first starting point.
So then, and Steve, in membership, the composition, would you be putting in, like, say if it was 30, so you would say shall be comprised of up to 30 people, so that it would give the RTM the ability to kind of shrink itself without having to revise the charter?
Well, I believe that Cliff came up with some language if acceptable to the commission, would have no more than 30 members, no more than 10 districts. And then we'd have to add language that permitted the council, to permit the RTM to reduce its size further by ordinance.
It
Now-
already has that ability just only during redistricting. Is that what it is?
Well, I think they'd be limited
I
to
don't think so.
redistricting because they would then have to do redistricting by modifying the numbers. I mean, I've said to somebody the other day, I wish we weren't doing this during redistricting. It would be much
too.
easier.
Yeah.
But we'd be doing it prospectively, frankly, if we were not doing it in redistricting. So it just seems to me that they would probably be committing to a structure for at least 10 years. I think they have to do it anyhow. I don't know how else they would. I don't think they have much more flexibility
Right.
the way it is set up right now, because I don't know how they can redistrict without going through a redistricting process during the course of the 10 years between reapportionment at the state and federal levels. So I think that Chris Brogan's language maintains the concept. We're just shifting the max is what we're doing.
I mean,
Am I correct on that? I believe that that's the way I read the vice chair's proposal.
That's what I was saying. I don't think I gave you any writing on that though, but yeah.
No, it wasn't in writing. I just heard it. I just heard.
Yeah,
it
yeah,
said.
no, correct.
oh yeah,
I
I'm
was
looking
just saying,
through his
yeah.
document. I'm like,
No, it's not in his document. No, he just said it. I mean, I have it.
Yeah, and I
wrote
was
it
just
down
getting
unless
that
I-
from the
unless I
current
wrote it
charter.
wrong.
Yeah.
Does it actually point out that we have to have 10 districts in the?
I
no.
think it says
Doesn't
no
say
more
that.
than.
No.
Doesn't say anything about districts.
Oh, it doesn't
in
about
our
district,
charter
right.
now.
It doesn't
Yeah,
say,
exactly.
Pam, yeah.
Says shall be elected by districts.
right. Can I just
Pam has the
offer,
floor.
may I just offer, having done this twice, or in the middle of doing it a second time, and I'm actually glad that Commissioner Brogan brought up that reapportionment clause. It should be done by an independent committee that's not involved, that the RTM is not involved in. I have a committee that I worked with last time that was dedicated to doing that work in a nonpartisan way that worked really, really well together. Really well. Super proud of the work we did there. There was a committee that tried to do the work beforehand that got very political. I don't know where this committee is going, but it seems to be that there's a lot of political pressure put out there when this happens. It might be better to just send this off to an independent commission to do that. Second piece of that is, I would encourage you to think about putting more specific language in the charter so that these things don't become politicized, because that seems to be, that was the issue prior to the last redistricting committee I was on. I'd hate to see that become an issue now. I worry a little bit that it is. And if there is a way to address neutrality and to remove politics from this important thing where it's supposed to be one voice, one vote, then I would encourage the commission to look at that. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart.
So, and Steve?
Yeah, I'll, for the night, we're not going to get that resolved tonight, but for the next meeting, I'll show you a representative samples of how other communities do it. There usually are a number of peoples. It's bipartisan, multi-partisan, and you have your registrars, both registrars involved in the process as a rule, and maybe the town clerk. Everybody does it a little differently, but I don't want to say it's unusual, but I don't think it is the general rule the way you do it, which is an entirely legislative function without the involvement of other people to try to maintain some level of neutrality as you're moving through the process. But I'll take a look at it, and give you some samples for the next meeting.
Okay.
Obviously, it wouldn't take effect for 10 years, but just for the record, it should be in your charter.
Okay, so back to the RTM size. Did you have any further comment on that, Pam, or you were talking more so about the reapportionment?
I was talking about being more specific in the charter and to lay out what it, not to leave it to an ordinance. That was my feeling on that, because it just becomes, it has the potential to become a political football. And I think that's worth considering, being in the charter, to remove the political football.
The size of the RTM is, I'm just trying to discern what
The
you're
number of
saying.
districts and yeah,
Okay.
I do. I think, Steve, do most charters set what it is? How is that done? Most charters are set. It's set in the charter,
Most
correct?
charters establish the districts because they're set for at least 10 years in most communities, because a lot of charter cycles they don't follow exactly, but they're set during the redistricting until there is a redistricting process. But I'll go through it again, but I'd be shocked. I thought it was unusual that you actually, there may be other communities around here, I don't know, but not having a fixed number of members of your legislative body is unusual.
And then, so the rationale, can we talk about the rationale? Because I don't know well enough for the number of districts. So it's at 10 currently. Has it always been, like, how long has it been 10, and why, how did we get here, and why were we going to 9?
Well, the 9 just became, Steve had told us he was working to get to an odd
Okay.
number. So that's
All
where
right, well,
9
let's stick
came
with the
from.
10 part of it.
And the 10 is because that's where the political parties have settled on 10. The reason why they went to court prior to last time was because they were fighting over all of that. One side wanted a certain number of districts, the other side wanted a different number of districts. We've had 12 districts, we've had various numbers of districts. We were settled in on 10. We went to 10 we stayed with 10 last time. We got compromised to get down from 50 to 40 members. It could be 15. It could be up to whatever it says in that thing, and however it all breaks out. But that's how it was decided. Political parties made the decision. So that's why I was trying to explain at the beginning of this, the rationale that Steve had, where he dropped down to 9 and we got an odd number, makes sense to me personally. And I don't see the difference between 30 and 27. So if we're settling on that high of a number, I'm going with the odd number. I just think that will work better based on the composition of everything else in town working off of an odd number. So that's it. It's really that simple. It's been 2 different political parties arguing over stuff. Which is why I said I would try and have this commission, ultimately the voters make a decision. Who is a bigger voice than them?
No one. I'm just wondering what do we bring to them? So why not go back to 12? I don't know.
It used to be 12 many years ago.
Or maybe
Well,
it's been
again,
10 an awful long time. I think when I was on that ill-fated commission, I can give you the history of what happened, but I prefer not to go into it right now. But there was talk back then of reducing it from 10 to 8. So, We've
haven't
had
heard a
10 for
large-
an awfully long time.
I haven't heard a large feedback from any place that raising the number of districts will achieve any beneficial purpose. So it seems like to be adding a change for the sake of changing something. I mean, if the compromise of going from 10 districts to 9 districts wouldn't be a radical change in realignment of any portion of that, and going to a smaller complement of RTM members, I think would achieve what I believe everyone on this call has recognized, that there's a level of efficiency to be gained by that without a terrible loss of anything that's really been working really well so far. So it seems to me to be a structure and a degree of change that could be readily explained to the voting public and to anyone that wants further details on it, but a compromise and an adjustment that makes plausible sense to address the challenges we all recognize exist.
I agree.
It's 12 less representatives than what we have now, 13, and it's larger districts once you eliminate one, with then less centralized representation. I think people won't like that. And we disagree on it, but I respect your opinion on it.
All right. Well, I think that's, it's been a healthy conversation about the size. I mean, we're kind of, it sounds like we're in the air, look, we've come a long way from where we were. We're in the ballpark of 30 and 10 and 27 and 9. That's a pretty close spot. And so maybe we leave it at that for tonight and kind of see if we can't wrap up the rest of this stuff and, come back to that as a final talking point. I knew that this would take a, good amount of time. But I think it just needs to, Steve's going to bring some stuff back in terms of the redistricting, and I think that we can, have a final kind of conversation on this if that works for everyone. I mean, I think we've come a long way. I don't think that there's any, I don't feel a consensus at this point, though. So, does that work for everyone to kind of table this with the progress we've made and move on?
Yes, that sounds fair.
Yes.
Okay. Steve, where are we next?
So I think we should just pass through the doc. Here, I'm just looking for notes. Okay, the next section. I guess we're not planning on any changes in ex officio non-voting members of the RTM, even if we reduce the size down. That's not been a topic of discussion. The right to vote provision remains the same. Now I got to tell you, this next section on judge of qualifications, I've raised a question about what on earth this means, that the RTM shall be the judge of the election and qualifications of its members. I'm not sure how that works in practical terms. I have seen it in other charters, to be candid with you, but if you're on the body, I don't know how the RTM can make a judgment that you are not qualified to be on the body once you're certified in an election. And I don't know whether Jim has any insights on this, and whether it's been used locally, whether it's really necessary, and its origins goes back to at least the 1947 and 56 special acts, but I'm not sure how, if at all, it's been used. And John, I don't know if you have any experience in Bridgeport with such a provision. I've not seen this.
I think the only thing I can think of on that is if there's if someone ran and won and it's found out that that person doesn't live in the district, can't the RTM use this provision to expel that person? That's my only thought on that.
Yeah, it might be.
Well, the other thing that I was
Didn't that
saying
happen?
is that this sounds
I
very,
think it might have happened once.
Yeah, it happened.
Yeah.
it sounds very similar to a provision in the state constitution that says that the House, I think, or maybe it's both chambers, but definitely the House is the sole judge of the election and qualifications of its members. So when there was an instance in Stratford where there was a challenge to a representative that was there was questions about the election, it was the legislature itself that decided the results of that and couldn't be challenged in court.
Yeah, but again, the legislature has inherent rights. We do not.
But if this is derived from a special act,
No, I think because it's a special act, I think it can be, I think it's bona fide in that regard. Because we do not, I don't believe that we have in the current charter any removal provisions for elected office. We have them for appointed office and department head, board and commissions. I would think that this would be that, but it's silent on what it means. You know, it says they shall be the judge, but what is the remedy? Because the charter is silent on any remedy. That's my concern about the way it's crafted. My view on it is, since it's a special act, and we think that there's any rationale, and maybe we could talk to members of the RTM about this, for leaving it because they view it as a cudgel in the event somebody does move out of district or out of town, then leave it. And maybe they could adopt an ordinance to deal with removal. Remember, removal is I have removal provisions for elected officials in a number of my charters, but I always tell people, I think I could make an argument to support it, but remember, we can't do recall in the state. I distinguish this from recall because recall can be done because you don't like the way, you don't like the haircut I got. You don't, to bring up a sore subject, but that you don't like the way I've changed my political views. I become a Democrat instead of a Republican, or a Republican instead of a Democrat. And the population says, well, we elected you as a D or an R. We don't like you anymore. We see those in the California recalls, and those are not permitted in Connecticut because there's no express grant of authority. I think you can justify removal because it deals with the orderly conduct of local government. And if you establish due process standards, I think it might withstand approval, but we don't have that. This is the closest thing to anything in the charter that addresses the issue of disqualification of somebody from elective office, and it only deals with their body itself. So I've been raising the question, and I'll talk to Jim about it and get his thoughts on it. But if it's a harmless provision, and somebody on the RTM wants to use it sometime, then maybe we just leave it.
Would this apply in the case of a conflict of interest, like if the Ethics Commission found out that a member had some sort of conflict? The Ethics Commission has no power to do anything about it.
Yeah, but the problem, Chris, is without a standard for what are grounds for removal from office, I think it's difficult to actually remove somebody for an ethics violation. We don't have a provision in this charter on that issue. This issue has come up in conversations I've had, and I have it in other provisions. I have charters where an ethics violation is a grounds for repudiation. Can it be grounds for removal from office? I imagine that it would be have to be a very serious ethical violation, because in most of my provisions, it has to deal with a felony committed in office, certain certain other crimes that are committed in office, incompetency, incapacity. I've seen some that say incompetence. I'm not sure how you prove that for purposes of removing somebody from office, under the Roman Huruska theory that everybody's entitled to have representatives, even mediocrity can be represented in public office. But we'd have to have a more robust removal provision. Does this standing alone give anybody the grounds to remove somebody? I'm not sure that I would want to be advising the RTM that it does, but I think that that's probably the reason. But I think we can think about some other provisions for purposes of reprimand or whatever. So I think Jim Baldwin has.
He does, Attorney Baldwin.
Yes, hi. I don't think that there's any question in my mind that this is not created for the purpose of removing someone who's in office, but however, it's just to be what it says it seems to say, which is the judge or their qualification upon their election. And so it seems to me, I'm guessing now, that it's a holdover from before the time the state statutes were in existence that supported the proposition that a person has to be an elector from that town or that municipality. And we already have that provision in the town charter. And the most recent example where this did happen, I don't think anybody invoked this section of the charter, but rather they cited state statute, and there was a complaint filed with the State Elections Enforcement Commission, which resolved the issue. So I think it's just a holdover from days gone by.
Okay.
So Jim, is your thought that we should repeal it?
Well, as you said, Steve, there's no harm, no foul in keeping it, but I don't think that it really serves any practical purpose.
Okay. I tend to agree with you on that. Okay. All right. So, I think that the town clerk, according to Pam, has a comment on 3.3A, the date of the organization meeting. Am I correct on that, Pam? Is Pam still here? There she is.
Yeah, I am. Sorry, I was on mute.
You thought it should be subject to notice.
Oh, so the date of the organizational meeting. So that went back to that other issue with the third Monday of the month.
Yep.
So I think since you took out that other piece, I don't think there's a, hold on, let me just look at my notes real quick. What page is that, 14?
Yeah, it's your notes 3.
Yeah, annual meeting. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that went back to, I think that's not an issue anymore, because you've established the third Monday thing, so it can be the fourth Monday. That tied back to, if we moved it to the fourth Monday, then obviously you couldn't have the organizational meeting on that night. So
Gotcha.
I think we're good now.
Okay, good. Just want to make sure we have resolved that. I'm looking to see whether Chris, well, I'm sure he's there keeping track of his 3.3D.
Yeah, my only question
You
is,
had
the
raised the
moderator have a 2-year
3.3D
term?
question.
So I
Okay.
leave that to others.
Yep. 3. I think there's a question on 3. On the rules and the appointment of committees. Am I correct? Yeah. Does anybody have any questions before that on?
Oh, before, sorry.
On the role of the moderator, the clerk, the moderator pro tem. These are all provisions I've kept from the current charter, just reorganized them. Then rules of procedure. Is everybody okay as a practical matter that they can adopt rules within 45 days? There's no harm because the charter clearly says the rules of the old RTM apply, so there will be rules. But I thought there should be some standard.
If you think that's a good practice, I'm fine with that.
All right. On the open meetings, was there concern about at regular meetings allowing people to speak on any other matters concerning the town that are within the purview of the RTM? Should that be in the discretion of the moderator?
Well, I have something on 15 if you, but in terms
sorry.
of,
Go back.
oh,
Go
okay.
back. Do what you have to do.
So that's the section, appoint the chairs and members of all committees. That would be giving the moderator more power than what they have right now.
Or that comes after the section I'm in, I think. Hold on. Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. My thing's.
I'm just ahead.
All
I'm
right.
just ahead of where your next comment is. Jim Baldwin has
Okay.
his hand up. Brian, I think Jim Baldwin has.
Jim. Hi, Jim.
Yeah, I actually have a.
To have what?
Hi, Jim Baldwin. I actually have a question about the adoption of the adoption of the rules. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Now we
Yep,
can.
we hear you now.
What's your question about the adoption?
Okay,
of the rules?
my question. Well, to make it an affirmative obligation of the RTM to every year or every 2 years, as the case may be, I don't know how that sticks here actually, but to make it an affirmative obligation for them to adopt rules, I don't know if that creates unnecessary debate or discussion for rules that I don't know how frequently they're changed. And so I look to Pam and others who have served on the RTM to answer that question. But since you can amend the rules at any time, why place that extra burden on the RTM is my only question. And I mean that as a genuine question, because I don't sit on the RTM, but I think people who do might have an answer.
I can tell you that our rules are outdated based on some of our practices, and that going back to 2014, we should have formed a rules committee to fix them, and we didn't. We should have formed a rules committee, and that's when the Republicans were in charge. And then when the Democrats took over, in speaking with that moderator, he had said to me we should have done a rules committee, and we didn't. And I think we all kind of know we need to do the rules. It's just a huge amount of work, so nobody's undertaken it. I don't know. I look to best practices of everyone else. We probably should have a rule that says we're supposed to establish a rule committee from time to time and go through this, because we need to. We all know we need to. It's just a huge amount of work that we have not undertaken. And it's no disrespect to anybody. It happened when I was moderator. It's happened under other moderators. It's a lot of work that we just, quite frankly, just didn't get to.
I think John Matola had something to add to this. Or was that you're muted, so.
So this provision would force the RTM to take a look at their rules every 2 years and make any appropriate changes or make no changes. So isn't that a good thing?
Yeah, I mean, I would just add that it's something that the state legislature does, because it's a new body every 2 years. And so most of the time they don't have any changes, but sometimes there are tweaks, but they have to adopt them.
Yeah. I agree with Brian. strong legislative bodies do adopt their own rules. And for the most part, they are basically the rules that were in place before. What you need to do at some point, my experience with local legislative bodies, they ignore these for years and years and years and years, and then they're setting up committees that aren't in their rules, and all you need to do is change the committees and the rules. I mean, it's not a big deal. But if they don't do it on a regular basis and they're not mandated to do it, they won't do it. And so again, the reason I put this in here, and I respect Jim's question a lot, the reason I did this is I was trying to say to a legislative body, if you want to be a legislative body, you want to be the body that holds others accountable, then you need to play by
Act
rules.
like one.
Because
Mhm.
what's that?
Act like one.
Well, no, that's it, and that's the reason I put that provision in the charter is to. I didn't quite put it that way, but I would say that you need to adopt rules, and you need to be serious about what it is you're doing.
Yeah,
Um,
no, I agree.
Can I ask a quick question on that?
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
So if the RTM changes its rules every 2 years or makes modifications as may happen, when they vote to do it, is that a just by majority vote, or is there anything that requires like a 2/3 approval to change their rules?
Well, I didn't put a standard in here. What do you think?
I would.
I
Well, I don't know,
Oh.
Pam. What do you think?
Well, I think, hold on, I think the rules say if we want to change them, I think we need 2/3, but I could be wrong about that.
And if it's 2/3, is that a good or bad thing? I mean,
You
I
can
don't
go
know.
either way, right? I mean, it depends on if you're trying to do something simple and somebody wants to be difficult. I don't know, but does it, you don't really want to flip your rules every 2 years,
right.
but we
Right.
should be reviewing them. Can we do a little
That's
bit of
why I left
homework on that part? I think it's a good idea to force us to look at our rules. Can we do a little homework on whether or not it should be majority or 2/3? Would that be okay with the commission?
I'm just taking a look at.
That's fine with me.
That's fine with me.
Sorry, I asked the question.
Yeah.
But you know what? It's good that this came up because, like I said, we just haven't been dealing with them.
I'll take a look on what the standard for adoption is. You always have the ability to suspend your rules if you need to suspend rules. All legislative bodies do that, and that's a very high standard.
And we do that a lot. Well, I shouldn't say a lot, but there are instances where we do that. Yes.
Okay,
That is a higher threshold normally than
that should be a
majority.
higher threshold.
Yeah.
On the open meeting question, based on the conversation from a little earlier, the way I drafted it is I had, with regard to regular meetings, the public can address any item on the agenda and any other matters concerning the town that are within the purview of the RTM. Should the second portion of that be within the discretion of the moderator?
I think it should be. I think it should be under. I think it should be both. I think it should be and at the discretion. It should be at the. It should be. Nobody should be coming to the RTM to speak on something that's not under our purview.
That is true.
Right,
But
that's what Steve said.
But the difference is that the public, not everybody has an absolute right to speak as long as they'd like to speak on matters on the agenda. I was distinguishing that from just a broad conversation of, here's what I think about the post road, when it's not before the RTM on a given evening. And I thought I'd make that one more discretionary, but
Honestly, I think that should be a decision that the RTM makes. That's just my personal opinion. I think that should be in the rules to regulate. But
it should be in the rules. Then I'll take the those two provisions out, and all right, I'll take those last two provisions out then. and it will be a rules decision. Okay. Does everybody understand that?
I do.
All right, good. Now we're at the committee portion, Pam. I think there was, now is everybody okay? Do we need to tighten up the section on committees? The first part in paragraph 4, where I established that everything that goes to the RTM has to go through a committee. I'm not specific about, and I wonder if you want me to, that we should state that committees should reflect the business of the town, or, the jurisdiction of the town, the departments of the town. Should I be more specific in terms of laying out what the committee should cover? Or is it just common sense that everybody knows there should be a budget committee? Everybody knows there should be an ordinance committee. I don't want to lay out the specific committees, but should I talk about the broad subjects that would be covered by committees? I don't know how, I'm comfortable with what I drafted. I just didn't know, based on earlier comments, whether anybody had any thoughts about tightening that up. If no one's jumping at me, I'll assume that everything's okay.
The only issue I had with this is it's too legalese. Like, it needs to be written in plainer English.
Okay.
I don't know. I have mixed feelings on whether you leave that in the rules of procedure or whether you do the broad strokes. I don't know that broad strokes are a bad thing.
Okay, let me play with some language and see if because I can give you some broad language.
So this rules of procedure requires to have been reviewed and delivered upon committee by action unless passed by a 2/3 vote of its entire. Does that mean does that keep the provision that the body could waive going to a committee by a 2/3 vote? Is that what that means?
Well, the word waived is missing, and it should be there unless waived by. Well, yeah, it should be unless waived by a vote of 2/3.
Right, because none of this was not reading right to me.
No, you're right. It's unless waived by a vote of 2/3 of the entire membership of the RTM.
So just that if you could just make that all simpler to understand.
I just put a note here: fix right in English. Got it.
Well, I think that what you were saying there is that the matter for passage either needs to be reviewed by a committee or passed by a 2/3 vote.
What I was saying here is that all matters before the RTM need to be reviewed committee prior to final plenary action unless waived by a 2/3 vote.
I thought you meant like the ordinance passed by 2/3,
No.
and so that was an inherent
It's a waiver. It's a waiver of the committee. It says that the general rule is you go through committees, but if there's a waiver, you come out of it. You don't go there.
Sounds good.
And when you say the rules and procedures shall require all matters before the RTM to have been reviewed and delivered upon by committee, which committee? Like, what does that mean?
By a committee, I could say by a committee of the RTM.
Well, that's the whole point here, I think, Pam, is that this is when we're trying to make the RTM more of a legislative body, that this is the establishment of the committee process, so that if you've got, a financial matter, it's got to go before the Finance, Revenue, and Bonding Committee, or if it's something to do with, public safety, it goes to the Public Safety Committee, and it has to be voted out of that committee before it can be brought to the RTM floor for final action.
Okay, so I'm just going to stick with my original comment, and that needs to be written so that it doesn't take a lawyer to figure out what that means.
Gotcha.
Because as a layman, I'm getting confused by it.
I'll fix it. As a lawyer, I'm getting confused, and I wrote it. So we'll fix it.
Before we push on, can we go back to one item on page 15? Subparagraph 3 on page 15, the moderator appoints the chairs of the committees, or is the chair, vice chair, and secretary elected by the members of the committees?
Right, that was the point I was trying to make earlier. I wanted to strike that.
That was the next issue. So how do we want to do appointments?
Our appointment system right now, speaking from experience, has worked out well. We have a committee that does that in a bipartisan fashion.
Does what?
They assign committees. We have a committee. It's called this. It's done through the Special Legislative Management Committee, or it's also known as the Committees on Committees, and it consists of 3 members of the majority party and 2 members of the minority party, and they meet and put together their recommendations for committee members. So the Republicans will put forward their recommendations for members to sit on a committee, and the Democrats do the same, and that's how the committees are formed. Then once the committees are established, the committees themselves elect a chairman, a vice chairman, and a secretary.
That's Rule 12, right?
Yeah. Now
Okay.
here's where it gets a little complicated. And that's where I don't know where you get, I don't think you get this deep in the charter. I think you do it in your rules. There's horse trading, for lack of a better word, about which how the committees are structured. The rules say that they need to be split evenly. So that was easy when we had a tie. It was 2020. There were 4 people on each committee, right? So right now, because of the way the majority break out, there are 3 committees that have 5 members with 3 Republicans, and then the other ones are split 4 and 4. And then the party leadership makes the decision of who gets the chairman and vice chairman. So that it has been that if it's the majority party, it takes all the chairmanships, and if it's split, then the minority party takes the vice chair. So I know this sounds overly complicated, but there's been arguments of how you split that out. Like right now, LNA, because it's the most powerful committee, has the majority party takes that chairmanship automatically and doesn't share it per se. So it does have its nuances, but for the most part, what we have in place is effective.
So should we just leave out of the charter appointment of committees? Or say that the rules, the RTM shall establish rules?
Or I would have it with that there shall be, you know what, if you're going to talk about committees and what there shall be, I would have that one specific in the charter. There shall be a committee on committees that, and then whatever the rules are right now for that. That would be my recommendation.
You want me to take Rule
We
12
actually
and
call
make it constitutional? I mean, that's,
yeah,
Right.
I think, yeah.
all right, let me play with that.
And then that gives the body enough discretion to do what they need to do, but it formalizes the fact that they have to form a committee to do it.
Okay.
It's, yeah, Rule 12. Yep. And we don't call it committees on committees anymore. We call it the Special Legislative Management Committee.
Oh, that's much more concise.
I won't tell you how that came to be, but there is a story behind it.
We can save that for a later date. All right, are we back on 16 then? We're actually to 17. Oh. No, wait a second. So now we're under appointment of committees, and we just went over that on 15 too. Steve, I think you're muted.
I accidentally muted myself. So I was telling all these jokes and I was laughing, but no one else was laughing.
Okay, well, we'll
We
laugh.
just did the committees. The next section is legal assistance, or required cooperation. Does everybody understand what that means? It's pretty basic. I think that is good English. It just basically is a provision of the charter that the RTM can look to if they're getting any obstructive behavior that it requires cooperation. I think the same kind of provision should be in the board and commission sections on the executive side, so that everybody's expected to cooperate with each other, and vice versa. Legal assistance. I try to establish a standard where the moderator would request the town attorney to attend, to provide not an assistance town committee, an assistant town committee, an assistant town attorney to assist the RTM in its legislative duties. In the event the town attorney or the assistant is not available, or there's a potential conflict between the RTM and other elected or appointed town officials, the RTM may, by a majority vote, retain outside counsel for advice on such matters. The moderator would consult with the town attorney to make sure there are no legal, ethical, or positional conflicts between council and the town. And the first selectman board of finance shall maintain a line in the annual town budget for said purpose, or the council may initiate a budget transfer without resort to the board of finance during the course of a fiscal year if funds are required. So this doesn't establish a fixed council for the RTM, but establishes a very clear right to be able to hire counsel under the circumstances where the town attorney or an assistant town attorney, if there are assistants, are not available, or if there's a potential conflict between the RTM and other officials. So that is the standard. Some people have been calling for a dedicated attorney. I think this was a standard that is pretty close to what a lot of communities have around the state of Connecticut, from large cities to smaller towns.
John Matola.
I like this provision. My only question is where it says the council may initiate a budget transfer without resort to the Board of Finance.
How does it work, John, during the year if there's a need for a transfer? What is the process?
I mean, would it be from like a contingency account or something like that? Would you allow the RTM to just transfer funds from any department line item?
It has its own line item, it looks like.
They're going to have their own line item with money budgeted for an attorney if they need that.
Yeah,
if they have that, why would there be a need to transfer money from one account to another? They already have a line item. If they run out of money?
If they run out of money, let's say they're involved in a fractious lawsuit of some sort.
Okay.
They shouldn't run out of money, in the standard year. But they do from time. I've experienced legislative bodies running out of money when I'm in the middle of a case, which is also very unsatisfying. But they usually can work it out through a transfer. I just wasn't sure how the transfer process worked here. I just wanted to make sure when there's when you do have a board of finance, normally a legislative body would be able to make the judgment. They call the director of finance. Where's their money that is available? We need to transfer it into the legislative account to address this issue. What this does, I have to tell you, and I've had conversations with people about it, is be careful what you ask for, because if you are funding legal services and you start spending a lot of money on legal services, that's where the voters may start paying attention to what the RTM is doing. And so you need to be very careful in the way you manage these funds and make sure that you only use this position or use this power when it's absolutely necessary. I'm not certain that there's a necessity for a town this size to have a full-time or available attorney, but they certainly should have the right to hire an attorney.
Yeah.
And decide what that budget should be during the course of the year. I wanted to allow for a transfer because I wanted to make sure that if they needed it, that they had the ability to transfer funds.
Okay, I'm okay with that. I think it puts, I'm gonna, I guess pressure is the wrong word, but I use it anyway. It puts pressure on the town attorney to make sure that they're providing legal services to the representative town meeting. And Jim's raising his hand right now.
Yeah, I see Jim raising his hand.
Yep, thanks.
Hi, Jim. Jim? I guess we'll table Jim until the mic comes back.
My only question is, if I could
Sorry
ask
about
on
that.
that, well, I just want to make sure there's a check and balance on the expenditure there. So I wouldn't, would the RTM still be bound by not exceeding their line? Like other departments aren't allowed to go over their line without getting approval of the Board of Finance. Like if we budget $100,000 in legal for the RTM and then we run up a bill of $200,000 and we don't have to go to the Board of Finance to get that transfer. Is that how this works? We can do whatever we want on our end because we don't have to worry about going through the Board of Finance?
That doesn't seem like a good system.
Yeah,
I know, I don't like that. I don't like that part at all, for
Maybe
sure.
Jim Baldwin has something to shed
Yeah,
some-
I have a few comments. Sorry, I had myself on mute. But as I said, and nobody could hear me, I've spoken to Steve about this, and I appreciate the sentiments behind it, and I'm not against it. What I fear is the potential for ambiguity in the language about a potential conflict, because that's ripe for interpretation. And what I fear is that the town attorney, as the ex officio member of the RTM, is going to potentially be just sidestepped for convenience of the legislative body, which I don't think is the intent of this language. So it's not a matter of not having something in here to the effect of what Steve has put in there, but I think it's a matter of just wordsmithing a little bit. So on that, that's my only comment on that point. And the other one about the budgeting, I would think it would come out of the town attorney's budget. And that is subject to review. And if the town attorney has to come back to the Board of Finance for a budget transfer because it's been depleted, perhaps for the reason that the RTM independent counsel has depleted large sums, well, then that's something that should go before the Board of Finance. So I think that's okay in that context. And if you do it that way, it would come out of the town attorney's legal budget.
I do like the fact that, well, I should say it this way. I don't like the fact that they can just spend money with no limit.
How do you avoid, and Jim and I will talk about language fixes to make this work. But the concern that I would have is if there is a dispute and you end up in court, how does the legislative body, if something rises to that level, and it's happened throughout the state, continue to support a litigation if it doesn't have the ability as a legislative body to transfer funds to fund their legal action? I said before, be careful what you wish for, because if you get involved in those kinds of activities, people will pay attention. And it could be a gross waste of money, depending on what the action is. If there's popular support for what the legislative body is doing, I suppose the public would not care as much. But I'm more concerned about stifling an action if there is, let's forget about a potential conflict, but an actual conflict. And they said, we're out of money, we can't pay your lawyers, get somebody to volunteer. How do you address that issue?
I don't know. How did we in the past?
I don't think it's ever happened.
No, it's never happened.
Then maybe it's not an issue.
It happened on the
Yeah,
Board
I
of
mean-
Selectmen, and that came out of the legal budget.
Oh, okay.
I'll talk to Jim about this language. Let's see what we can come up with.
Yeah,
I think we
Right.
could look to
Yeah.
some past practices for some guidance. Yeah.
Okay. How are we doing, Mr. Chairman? 9:36, what's the game plan?
I'm ready to continue on if everyone else is for a little while longer.
Okay.
Without objection, let's move on.
Yeah, I think we should try to get through this document.
All right, meetings of the RTM, any issues with the language in regular or special meetings?
I have a question here. What why does it have to say in here that we must meet at least once a month at a regular meeting decided on? Why can't we just establish our own calendar? So for example, if we don't want to meet in the month of July and we want to recess for that month, this would preclude us from being able to do that.
I believe this is in
I
your
know we
current
could-
charter. I didn't make this up.
I know, and
Yeah.
like we're breaking pieces of it.
Yeah. But this language on the, at least once a month, is in the current charter, so that's up to you.
Yeah, and with a motion, you can.
Well, it says you
Well,
can
so wait, so
dispense-
maybe I read, Steve, maybe I read this wrong. So does it,
There's no business
so when
to
I'm
be acted upon.
adopting a meeting calendar, I could adopt a meeting calendar with less than a month, one meeting a month.
You see that? Well, what it says is that if there's no business to be acted upon at a regular meeting, it may be dispensed with upon the direction of the moderator to the town clerk, who shall notify the members.
Like other boards and commissions, Jim, why don't you just set the meeting, and if you don't need it, cancel it?
Yeah.
Well, this is the legislature, I mean,
Right, but
yeah,
if they have no business, they can cancel it. Why wouldn't we just keep the meeting? Why wouldn't we just establish the meetings at the beginning?
Well, here's the problem. I hear what you're saying, but here's the problem. You're saying that this particular board has to meet every month, and you have to adopt that they're meeting every month,
Mm-hmm.
and therefore you have to notice it. If the body doesn't want to meet in July, they cancel the meeting, right? Well, here's the problem. The department heads see that there's a meeting in July, and they don't plan for that, and we want to dispense with it, and then we're forced to be called back for items that really could be held over for October because they think for August that because they think we're having a meeting in July. Why can't we just have what everybody else has, which I think is a provision of there shall be 10 meetings?
Is this something that comes up regularly? Like, is this an issue that comes up within the RTM about the number of meetings?
We follow the 10 meeting rule, yeah. I mean, what I mean, we could leave it if you want, but it just, I don't know why this particular body has to be so much more strict than everybody else.
Well, maybe it's because they're going to have new powers and we've got to rely on them to actually come in and do the work.
All right, well, if they're going to get more powers and we're going to go in a different direction, I'll let it
We
go.
got to act like a legislative body. That's our theme here.
Yeah, that was my point.
All right.
Steve's muted again, and I'm not doing that to you. It was a funny
I
joke.
accidentally I've been pushing a button somewhere. I don't know what I've been doing, but it's the legislative body. It's different than other boards and commissions. And
no, that's okay. I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah.
I got it. We're good.
a lot of charters have twice a month meetings for their legislative body. So
Yeah. No, we do. We meet twice a month. We do.
Yep.
So it's fine.
yeah. So then again, a lot of this language is the public notice provision is new, and I'm going to hopefully in the next couple of weeks, have different definitions of public notice and meeting notice that will then be set forth throughout the charter. And that meeting notice is kind of a draft of the definition that we'll see throughout the document.
Except you're going to pull out that newspaper thing.
That's why I have it highlighted. I have it
Okay,
highlighted.
perfect.
Yeah.
Yep. Awesome.
The next section,
Also, why 5 days before the meeting? Why does that have to stay?
did you not want to have a submission requirement? It doesn't have to be sent by mail. Also, that's another.
That causes all kinds of complications because departments have items that come up and we have this whole convoluted thing that has to be in 5 days ahead of this to get to this. And in today's technological world, we should be able to give the body something on Friday, and they shouldn't be precluded from being on the agenda without setting off this whole series of special notices.
It's a complicated process.
Yeah. Anybody who's been on any other thing trying to get something on an agenda for an RTM knows it's a giant headache.
So what if we did in compliance with FOIA rules?
Yes, perfect.
Pertaining to meeting notice. The major thing there, Pam, is you want to make sure the public has things.
Absolutely.
And so at least 24-hour notice and should be posted.
100%.
Okay, good. I'll fix with that. Is everybody okay with the general powers provisions? The key here is that I mean, most of these are pretty standard. The key is the section dealing with the right of rejection of appointments to boards and commissions, which is subsection F. And it's an affirmative vote. This would be 18 of 27. If you were 30, you change the number, but it would be a firm number where they have a right to reject appointments to boards and commissions. Now, I have been told that there are some boards and commissions where the RTM, I think there's one in the charter, if I'm not mistaken, the Ethics Commission, and there's several other boards and commissions where they already have a right of advice and consent. Am I correct on that?
Yes, that's true.
So we may have to figure out a way to grandfather those in. But this is the general standard And the reason I recommended the right of rejection is this legislative body is going to be taking on a lot of new responsibilities that they haven't historically. And, if the Board of Selectmen is gone and they're going to be stepping up as the oversight body of the town, the legislative oversight body. And so rather than have a requirement for them to conduct hearings on 400, I've heard the number could be in excess of 400 members of boards and commissions broken down over the course of their staggered appointments, which could be 100 a year, 75, 125 hearings a year. I thought that the process should start with a right of rejection, so that some screening group would go through and people would make determinations about what candidates for office they would reject to be on the board or commission. So that was my rationale on the right of rejection as opposed to an advice and consent requirement. The contract language in H refers to a section that's in the first select persons section that is the Board of Select, the RTM will not have a right to look at every contract that the first selectman signs. There's a standard that, frankly, if they adopt a budget and there's money in the budget to go to contract for a contract that's 1 year or less, that's an administrative function. And there's other ways to address that. If a contract is for a term in excess of a year, it's a multiple fiscal year contract, it does have to go to the legislative body so that they would address those contracts. And I also put in a category that if a contract's in excess of $100,000 and somehow exempted from competitive procurement and solicitation requirements, those items would go before the RTM as well. I do have a provision. I think I was talking to Chris about this earlier today, or somebody, about having a threshold based upon the consumer price index or other like measure to index the standard that we establish to make sure that if in 20 years the $100,000 seems puny, that it would actually go up with the consumer price index, so that that number would change. So this would be a new authority for the RTM, and so I just want everybody to understand how that worked. They do not approve every contract that would be signed by the first selectman.
John Matola has a.
Yep.
Yeah, I just thank you for explaining that. I understand that. So on the appointments, what we're saying here is the current charter vests confirmation power with the Board of Selectmen for several commissions. And so we're not going to vest that power with the RTM now, but we're going to just have this provision in Section F. Is that what the thought process is? That they're not going to actually have any hearing of some sort. They're just going to have the opportunity to, within 45 days, take a look at an appointment if they want to, basically.
And reject it within the 45 days.
And reject it.
Yeah.
Okay, and so, all right. And then I think the two things that they currently do now, Pam, the RTM, is I think they appoint the Ethics Commission and Historic Commission. So we just have to double check that. I think that's what the RTM does now.
It's definitely the Ethics Commission. I'm taking a look right now at the Historic Commission to see if that is in fact covered. It's not covered in the category. Let's see here.
Okay. I thought it was, but I could be wrong.
Yes, advice and consent is there for the Historic Commission. Mike, all right. So I
Oh,
wouldn't
sorry,
take,
I was on mute.
I
Harbor
wouldn't take-
Commission.
And the harbor? Okay.
Harbor Commission.
is that in the charter?
I don't know. No, that might be an ordinance. So that would stay the same. So are you saying the stuff in the ordinances stays the same?
No,
is that
I mean,
how that's?
the ordinances, frankly, the ordinances should be following the charter. The ordinances should be following the charter, frankly. And
Oh,
so, you
well,
know,
then we
clearly,
might be screwing that up.
I don't know what the authority for that is, but you know, there's no restriction within your charter on boards and commissions, so maybe that's it. But I think that look, if they're covered, I don't think we should take that authority away. I think we should
Leave them alone, yeah.
I think we
Right,
should
right.
create
Okay.
exceptions within this rule for the Ethics Commission, the Historic District Commission, and what's it, the Harbor Commission?
I think you're right. I don't think that's not in the charter. It's in an ordinance.
It's not in the charter. I'm looking at it right now.
It's on the town website. The Harbor Management Commission is in the town code, chapter 24. I have not gone to the code, but that's what it says on the Harbor Management Commission webpage.
Yeah. I think if there's advice and consent, I don't think you should we're trying to give
Yep.
the legislative
Nope,
body more authority. I don't think
I-
we should disrupt any authority they have right now.
I agree.
Yeah. Okay. And then just maybe I'm being a little jumping the gun here, but I think you need something in here that says that the RTM needs some type of investigative power that was previously vested with the Board of Selectmen. And I don't think you have that in there.
And the subpoena.
And then you also, Steve, need something that talks about how are we going to approve legal settlements? Is that an RTM that's got to be vested now with the RTM, I guess, right? Or can it be a combination of the first select person with a couple of members of the RTM? I'm not sure. I know you were aware of that a week or so ago, but we need to figure that out.
Yeah,
So
I think I have a placeholder in another section.
Okay.
But I could be wrong. I'm going to look here. My recommendation on that is that I think one of the best, and I hate to compare you to a large city, but I think that the litigation settlement committee concept in New Haven is a really excellent way to do that. It's a combined legislative executive function. And you may have a threshold so that if it's in excess of a certain amount, then maybe the full legislative body would have to act. But I'll make a note on that, and I'll talk to Jim and see if he has any thoughts on settlement of legal matters.
And then what's your thought on the investigative power of the RTM that the Board of Selectmen currently has?
I thought I had suggested that might be a possibility of transferring over there. Remember, that's a special oversight. Legislative oversight is a legislative function. The subpoena authority is granted by special act. I think an argument could be made that it was a legislative function of the Board of Selectmen, and an argument could be made that could be transferred to the RTM. Again, be careful what you wish for, and my hope would be that RTMs don't go overboard on those functions. But I believe inherent in the legislative authority is an oversight function.
So there could be a provision that they have that power just pursuant to the Connecticut General Statutes, something like that. Period. Right?
Well,
something
the
like
statutes
that?
yeah. I mean, I think that there's case
Okay.
law that addresses it, but I'll deal with that. I have that language.
All right.
Everybody okay with that?
two quick comments, and this maybe somewhere else it will have to, it should say first selectman, if that's the way we end up going, we'll have to provide notice to the RTM of every appointment. I'm not sure this is probably the section to put it in, but somewhere I think it will be needed.
Yes,
Right.
absolutely.
And then
We haven't gotten
again,
to the
maybe
board and commission section, but yes, notice of appointment.
and then something to think about probably also in the other section is whether each commission or board should be required to provide some sort of report to the first selectman, the RTM, every year of, you know, when they've met, top level, what they've done, who's attended, stuff like that.
I think that would go in to the board and commission section.
Yeah.
You know,
Okay.
we're not going to have time to be really robust with that, but
Yeah, no,
there
I
are a
know,
few
but
things.
yeah.
There are a few things that really should be like of that nature. Absolutely.
Can I ask a question on letter G, approving leasing, sale or acquisition of real property?
Yeah.
What is, like, we don't, the RTM currently doesn't get, some stuff resides with the first select person, some stuff kicks in to come to the RTM. That all still remains the same?
Well, it depends on what it is. I'm not sure what your policies are, but if you're dealing with leases that are multi-year, they should go to the RTM.
Yep, they do. They do.
Sale or acquisition of real estate, I'd have to look at the statutes. There is language in the statutes on sale or acquisition of real property. Those could be substantial expenditures, and that's why they're usually legislative powers that they have to go to the RTM or the council for approval.
Okay, thank you.
This is Jim Baldwin. Can I add to that?
Yeah.
There is already a very robust real property management section or ordinance that was adopted by the RTM that covers all of that. It also incorporates by reference those state statutes that require certain reviews by TPZ and others. And so I think that section of the town code already covers all that and more that is trying to be stated in subsection G. Maybe that's all you're referring to, but I just question therefore whether it's even necessary since it's something that we already have by town code.
Having it in the charter, Jim, just make sure that it always stays in the town code.
Right.
It becomes a constitutional standard. That's the reason you would have it in the charter. I think so that's up to you as to whether or not everybody feels that that it's something that the town is already cognizant of. That's the only reason you'd have it in the charter, to make sure you don't eliminate those provisions at some point.
Oh, that makes good sense. Okay.
Now, I put in, are we okay with the powers? And I have a lot of changes, a lot of things I'll fix on that. 3.6, I left a lot of blanks here. And let me tell you my thinking on this, because we're, and I can draft something, but I think we're very deep into this process. I may propose that instead of doing an entire how a bill becomes a law provision, simply having a provision that the RTM shall establish a procedure for the adoption of ordinances, resolutions, orders, or motions that run all the way through the process, subject to the right of the voters to petition for a referendum. In effect, if they don't like it wouldn't cover resolutions or motions, but it would cover ordinances, so that we don't spend a lot of time trying to develop a legislative process. I'm not sure we have the time to do that at this point. So I was going to suggest that I come up with some language that punts it to the RTM to create the process for adopting an ordinance. I don't know what everybody thinks about that.
Jim Matola, John Matola.
I
just named you Jim.
I think that's fine, and I'd just like to obviously see what the language says.
Yeah, obviously. No, yeah, I'm not
And,
getting carte blanche here. I just wanted to let you know that I don't think we need to go through all those elements.
I agree.
All right. And the next two sections are important: of the public notice of final action and publication and posting of the legislation. Right now, and maybe Jim Baldwin could correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think we have anything in the charter on emergency legislation and appropriations. And I was just wondering how the town deals with that. Do we operate strictly under state statutory guidelines? How do we deal? Maybe John Matola would have the answer too. When we're going through a crisis, how do you deal with emergencies?
Well, it's usually, and Pam, correct me if I'm wrong, and Jim, it's usually if, example, a boiler at a school blows up and we have to go through the process to appropriate money, it would go to the first select woman, would bring it to the Board of Selectmen, who would vote on it. Then it go to the Board of Finance, who would act on it quickly. Then it would go to the RTM. I think that's what would happen. I have a question here. I say, do we need this provision in our charter? I guess I don't know if we need it. I mean, I don't know what Jim Baldwin thinks about it, but what emergency are you envisioning, Steve, that would require this type of provision other than we have to get some money appropriated quickly? Is that
Well, I'm
it?
talking about a tornado. I'm talking about a flood. I'm talking about the pandemic. To be honest with you, was a medical emergency for a lot of people, but it didn't require an awful lot of manipulation of funds. In fact, I think a lot of towns saved money during the pandemic. But I'm talking about a standard emergency where there is the need for emergency funding to help deal with a fire, a flood, pestilence, the things that come from the Old Testament, that kind of thing. And I just raised it. I'm not saying you have to do it if you have survived without it. I won't argue that you need to have it, but I thought it wouldn't be appropriate for me not to raise it. So that's the kind of thing I'm talking about, which would require, again, we have to comply with FOI, but it would require shorter notice requirements, accelerated approvals, those kinds of things. But if you feel that it's been addressed by your town without this, then I'm not sure it would be necessary. I see Jim has raised his hand again.
Yes, this is Jim again. I have looked into this issue very deeply, and I've familiarized myself with the statutes. And while the town charter is rather brief in how it addresses the Board of Finance, I can assure you that they are vested with the power and authority to make necessary transfers of funds, so long as there's sufficient funds in the contingency account or in the town's coffers. So we are definitely covered by this, and I think that it's an important responsibility that is primarily vested with the administration, but most of all the Board of Finance. So I don't think it is necessary, quite frankly.
All right. That's all I wanted to know. Okay. The next section you will recognize as your referendum section. And, we could spring this back to where it is now. I thought that it made sense to put your petition for overrule, both for the ordinances and for the budget, in the section of the RTM, because it is the natural end of the legislative process. Unless you think you need to keep a separate chapter going or article on referendum, I thought it made sense to consolidate the document to place it here because this is the end of the legislative process. This is where it falls, and this is where it goes in the event the public wants to put something on the ballot. So I didn't change anything in here. It's a recodification, but you'll notice when I give you the consolidated charter that the section on referendum will look like it's missing, but this is it. It's right here without a word changed. Is everybody okay with that?
I am. I just had one thing on section back on page 20 under F2, publication and posting of adopted legislation.
Yep.
Would you mind, Steve, just reaching out to the town clerk because she needed to speak to you about all this and its practical purposes?
What I'll do is absolutely, Jim and I are going to be talking about a bunch of things, and I may, let me call the town clerk and sit down with her on some of this stuff,
Okay.
and walk through it. I will definitely do that.
But one
Thank
question on this, the $150,000 limit. I don't know how old that is, but is there any reason to have that indexed either historically to correct it to current day spending or to index it for future increases?
Does everybody, I have that already in the contract provision.
Right.
Does everybody think it makes sense in the referendum provision to have the $150,000 standard indexed to what, CPI or what? What would it be?
Well, maybe it should be adjusted. I mean, looked at this historical, it went from 25 grand to 20 years later to 50 grand to, 20 odd years later to 150 grand. So now we're 25
years later.
Yeah. So maybe it should be 300 and then index it.
Yep.
It seems like that's way too low of a number,
Yeah.
150.
So 300, 500, something like that would probably be more.
What do you think?
Maybe 500, and then you don't index it, because once you index it, it gets complicated. People have to go do the math.
I think that's probably true. Have a charter revision if you want to move it up.
Okay.
So 500,000 going once.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
All right.
Yeah. Oh, Jim. We almost got it in, but Jim raised his hand before we got there.
Town attorney.
I'm just thinking out of the box here, but you could tie it into a percentage of a mill rate increase if you want to use kind of a moving number, something that's more flexible. Just an idea.
Or a percentage of the town budget. What was the total town budget this year?
300 million round numbers.
325 million or something like that.
It's probably easier just to put a number in there, but I think
so.
Yeah,
I agree. Just go with 500,000.
Okay.
Especially at 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're losing steam.
And I just, because we're not going to have time to go over every line that remains here. We're still. Can we address, Mr. Chairman, some of the larger issues that are still here? Or do we want to resume where we are at our next meeting or have another meeting between now and our next meeting because we're going to run out of meetings?
We are going to run out of meetings. What are the larger issues that you think are remaining?
Well, the Board of Selectmen. What do we do
Okay.
about the Board of Selectmen?
All right.
The COO.
Okay.
And I'll look at everybody else's comments for some of the smaller nits in here. The COO, the duties of the first selectman. I think they're pretty standard duties.
Well, I think we can adjust the first two because I I think, I could be totally shocked, I think we've got some consensus on those.
All right, so you want to go to Article 4, which is currently titled Board of Selectmen and the first. Let me ask you something. I talked to one of our commissioners today, and she said to me, and I've been looking for guidance from all of you on this. How do we want to address the title select man in this charter? Do we want to call it select person? Do we want to call it select man or woman? Give me your preference, because this is the time for me to clean the whole document up. So now I hope it's not out of place to raise it right now, but I just wanted to do that since we're moving to that.
Yeah, it's like, I can imagine a half-hour conversation on this, and we're just gonna do a find and replace at the end, but,
All right, if you want to
Go
put it off,
select
yeah.
person.
person,
Select person.
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 Okay,
That
was
doesn't
easy.
mean we call the whoever, so.
Right. It's just
Call
for
it select
language.
person in the charter, but you call the person select woman,
Correct.
select men, when
Right.
whoever holds the office.
Correct.
Got it.
I agree.
I'll fix it.
In the document,
All right, I'm glad. Thank you, Marlene, for raising that.
because it's not
In our
the
conversation.
incumbent, it's the person that holds
Yeah.
the, whoever.
Yeah.
All right. So the issue is in section 4.1. The first select person will be the chief executive officer of the town. And the question is, do we, and we'll get into some of these other issues, but what do we do about the board of selectmen? Is this something we want to address tonight?
Yeah,
Mhm.
Okay.
does anyone want to keep the Board of Selectmen right now? But did Jay Gross have any
Well,
feelings
well-
of?
Um,
What are you saying, John?
I think if we, and I hate to say this, if we don't come to a consensus on the RTM issue, you know, you may have to keep the Board of Selectmen. That's my only concern. So I think
Okay,
the idea is we kind of want to
hold off on these.
get rid of it, but we need to think about that RTM issue still, and we're not going to decide that tonight.
No,
So
okay,
I just think you leave it right now, Steve, and hopefully we can get to some type of consensus on the RTM issue, and then you'd be able to eliminate that Board of Selectmen language.
All right. Well, my draft has eliminated them. We'll put it back in if we can't resolve the RTM
Right,
issue,
right.
based on earlier discussions. Another major issue is the COO. And I guess there's two issues with the COO based on conversations I had with some of you in the last few days. And one of them is, should the COO be subject to approval by the RTM? And this was the only one. Several people I've talked to have suggested that this is an important enough position, even if it's serving at the pleasure of the first select person, that the COO is important enough based on the intent behind the creation of it, that it would be a position that would be a confirmation position with the RTM. So that's issue number one. And why don't we just address that, Mr. Chairman?
okay. I read the room wrong the last time, so what do we think on this one? John?
I say yes for this important position.
Okay,
And I'd say that would be a terrible challenge to have someone extend an offer to someone and then have however many people on the RTM involved in knowing about it, and you're trying to hire them away from another organization. It just makes the whole HR offer process very challenging to effectively execute.
I totally agree with John Wynn. Completely makes it a hiring nightmare for on the other person's end. and attracting anybody and getting anybody to apply. I just don't think it's a good idea.
I-
We don't make the CFO get approved by the Board of Finance.
That's a good point. I understand what you're saying. But what about, well, let me ask you this question, thinking outside the box. What, could it fall under the category of the 45 days, Steve, that they could? What if the first select person hires someone who's totally unqualified? There's no check and balance with respect to that. So you got to have something to have that check and balance, and maybe it just falls under that 45-day provision. So the first select person better hire someone who's qualified, and if he or she doesn't, then you're going to have an RTM issue where they have the authority to reject that appointment within the 45 days. That way, John, I agree with your comment on that. I didn't think of that. I think that's a very valid point. But the first select person better understand that he or she needs to hire a qualified person for this position. That's all.
I think we have it reasonably well codified what the requirements for the position will be, both in the way of, education, experience, credentials, licensing, et cetera.
Yeah, John,
I
you're
agree.
100% right, and that's good. But what happens if the first select person doesn't hire somebody who fits these categories? He or she says, Joe Smith's my new COO. Well, what are his qualifications? And he doesn't fit these standards. What's the remedy? There's no remedy at that point.
You file a complaint. I mean, we have it right now. You have the CFO and their requirements. There's no check there. You're really going to turn off people from applying for a position if they know they've got to go through this. And now they've put themselves out there and they're on a 45-day refusal period. I don't think we should be limiting our talent pool.
Well, here's going to be the remedy. I'm going to tell you, if a first select person hires someone who's unqualified during the budget process, they may defund that position. I guess that's the remedy. But and I don't know if they can because it's a charter provision. That's another issue. So,
Well,
I understand your concern.
The way this charter
But I
provision is
think
written,
that-
John, is it says the budget shall provide for a chief
That
operating
has to.
officer.
Right.
So it restricts the ability to not provide for the COO.
That's right.
What if we
You're right.
had
No,
like human resources do the first pass at like the qualifications in terms of?
That's a good idea.
Well, that's in here.
Or a selection committee.
Okay.
No, that just says that they prepare the qualifications.
Yeah.
Maybe
Right, they
that,
don't.
yeah,
just put together.
HR, like in state hiring processes, they have like a DAS screening process whereby, you don't even make it to the hiring person's door if you don't meet the minimum qualifications for the job. So they like pre-screen the applicants and like they basically have rejection over, well, look, this person just, the resume doesn't even make it to the hiring authority's desk because they're not qualified.
That's a good, I like that concept. That way you make sure you get a qualified person. And it satisfies Pam and John's concern, which is a real valid concern about, publicizing someone's looking to leave one job to go to another job. So I'm okay with that.
I'm sorry, Marlene, if I cut you off. I didn't know if you.
I was just wondering about the selection process of this, like how does it go through the process? I mean, this is a pretty important position, and we're just asking the HR director to be so it's going to be the HR director and the first select person, and no RTM involvement, no small selection committee of any kind for this really important position.
I don't see one in here, but that doesn't mean we can't type it in.
I don't know. I mean, is that anything, Steve, that's been done, or, I mean, this seems like a very, to John Matola's point, what if the person isn't qualified? Is it just two people just, talking to these people? What, is there a selection criteria or a selection committee that we can put together for this particular position? It is a very important position.
Well, in many communities, larger and smaller than Fairfield, a lot of executive appointments have to be approved by the legislative body, period. And that's, it's high-ranking positions, and it's
Right.
just normal department heads. And it seems to work in a lot of places. I mean, so the concept of not going through some kind of vetting process of that nature is unusual.
Right. We do it on the
And-
corporate side, so why wouldn't,
No, and I think people in the public sphere understand that they normally have to be subject to appointment. I think advice and consent makes more sense, respectfully, John Matola, than the right of rejection, because that's up front. You're not, unless they, I've seen mayors and first selectmen hire people on an acting basis and then have them rejected. We just had a police chief rejected by the Board of Alders in New Haven, who was hired on an acting basis. And so that does occur from time to time. But first selectmen and mayors have to go through a vetting process. And if it's a confirmation position, the way it's addressed is they call in the leadership of the confirming body, whether it's the RTM or some other entity. In this town, it would be the RTM as legislative body. And so that is not unusual in municipal government.
Again, I just think this has been my concern all along with this, has been the talent pool. And I think you're setting yourself up to take people out of the running. That's been my problem all along with what we're trying to do here. And I think you have this written, honestly, so there's so much in here that they have to have this or this or this or this or this or this or this. I think you have it pretty well tied up in E.
And if they don't have this, this, and this, but the first select person hires this person anyway, there's no remedy. That's the problem.
And how do we handle the remedy on the Board of Finance with the CFO? It's the same situation. How do we handle that? If you hire the CFO, if you hire a CFO that doesn't have the qualifications that are in the charter, then how do you handle that?
You don't. That's the problem. Maybe we should have that in the CFO too. Steve is 100% correct. A lot of these high-level municipal appointments for department heads are approved by a legislative body. That's how it works in municipal government. So, and I would say 95% of the time they're approved. You don't get wholesale rejections of individuals, but this position is extremely important, and there's got to be some type of check on this position. That's all.
So you don't have.
Can we hear more? Can we hear more about the confidential process piece? Can you guys revisit this and come back and tell us how that works?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean confidential?
Well, whatever you were mentioning before, that there was a committee that was going through.
At the state level. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I'd be way more comfortable with that. I want people to put themselves out there and be an applicant. And I understand this is standard for municipalities. I have a pretty strong opinion on some of this, that we aren't getting some of the best talent we could get. I just don't want to restrict us. I really don't.
Okay.
So
You
who
understand?
hires the CFO right
Steve?
now?
First select person, right, Pam? That's it.
Correct, correct.
Oh, okay, all right. I thought you were talking about the Board of Finance somehow, and I had.
No, see,
No,
I
no,
hadn't
no,
seen
no.
it.
That was sort of my point. So,
Oh,
you
okay,
know,
all right.
I would
confused.
just, I'd like us to see, I'd like us to rise to a higher standard than other municipalities. You know, if that's a committee, you know, a hiring committee, I'd be interested in hearing that.
I'll give Brian a call and talk about the state process and see if there's somebody I could talk to that can walk me through that. All
Yeah.
right.
Steve, one other point on this, on the COO, the responsibilities that they would be undertaking. And, you know, you have some language in some of the other towns that I know you work with. You know, town budgeting, department management and oversight, town long-term planning, capital budgeting. I mean, there's a set of 5 or 7 position execution responsibilities that I think would be good to have articulated.
I'll be happy to give you some alternatives. There's 2 schools of thought on that. John, you and I have talked about this. One of them is my school of thought is I have in the past drafted very prescriptive descriptions that really lay out what they do. That's now been rejected by a couple of my communities to go for something that is broader, that gives the chief executive the ability to basically assign the broad managerial responsibilities to the COO. But I'll lay out a few provisions for you for our next meeting, so that we address that issue. I want to point out for the record, this may not exist in your draft, but I just said to John Matola that the right of rejection doesn't work in this case, and I have a note to myself: should this be subject to the right of rejection? So I want to point out that I was thinking the same thing at a given point. So that's where we are with that. So
Can
I'll
I
come up with some.
raise one minor point? Some other people mentioned to me, other towns call this position a town administrator. Is that a more appropriate term? COO does sound like more of a corporate term. And also, I think usually in the corporate sense, they do have a lot of direct reports. I don't have a strong feeling either way, which one would sound better.
Jerry Ann has a town
I tend to
administrator.
agree.
Yeah, the title, you know. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
They're doing, it's more than operations. I think that it should be administrative officer personally.
Chief administrative officer or town administrator? What do we want to do here, folks?
No, I think it should be chief administrative officer.
CAO, yeah.
Okay.
So listen, I think that this might be a good breaking point. I think we've covered a lot of ground. It's very positive, but I think that we're losing some steam and kind of don't have as, you know, we could use a little break and some clarity. But in terms of scheduling, I am a bit concerned, or remain concerned. And so 2 things. Our next meeting is the 14th. I guess I would suggest perhaps trying to meet earlier on that day. I know that, I know Marlene, you suggested today. I couldn't make it earlier, so I apologize. That was my fault. But if we, you know, we do have some notice now, so if we can endeavor to perhaps meet at 6 on the 14th, if that works. I can follow up with Jay tomorrow and see how that fits with his schedule. So first on that, any responses, any thoughts on that? Okay
That's
with
good.
6? Okay.
The 6 o'clock is fine.
Any objection to 6 o'clock? All right, so I will check with Jay Gross on that. And then I'm wondering, and I know that this is where I become even less popular, is that you know, May 12th is our last meeting, right? And
So far, let me. I don't want to extend this for everybody, but Jim and I talked a little bit. Jim Baldwin and I talked about this earlier today, and Mr. Chairman, we should talk about this. I'm trying to get a feel for when the Board of Selectmen would like to see this document, how far we can go, and whether we can eke out a few extra weeks. We got a late start on the, we did a very long due diligence provision.
We
And got a
did.
late start on the actual substantive work. So, I talked to Jim, and I think we need to take a look and see what the expectations are for the Board of Selectmen right now in terms of receiving a document from us. So we may be able to extend this a couple of weeks into middle May or whatever.
Okay. Well,
I'll leave it up to you. But that's our last scheduled meeting. Statutorily, we can, if the Board of Selectmen is going to need full 60 days to review it, we probably have to get it to them by that date. If they're willing to do it in a shorter period of time, then we can move it out 2 or 3 weeks.
Sorry, I just
okay.
went down for, I just missed it. I just went down for like 5 minutes there.
Ooh,
Just went
Well,
black.
what you missed is that we're gonna start at 6 o'clock, unless you're not okay with that, on the 14th, on our next meeting, 6 p.m. instead of 7. So we'll
That's
probably
fine.
have to notice the first hour as a special meeting. But that we can take care of.
Yep. No,
And
no problem.
then Steve told us that we may have some wiggle room in our end date, which is currently, we have meetings scheduled till May 12th. I was going to suggest that we tentatively try and pick a Saturday and maybe even go so far as to meet in person.
That'd be
because-
novel.
Yeah, and I feel like we could, with, kind of a fresh start in the morning-ish hour and see, how far we can go. I know weekends are, everybody's own time, but we're nearing the finish line, and I can feel it, and I just think that maybe we can, knock a lot of it out. But,
I have found that Saturday meetings can be very productive.
Oh, okay. I thought you were headed somewhere else. That your tone
No,
sounded
no,
like it was
no,
not
no.
positive at first.
No, because and I think, look, I don't want to interrupt anybody's golf dates and things like
No.
that. But I think if you can start earlier. We have to find a way to make sure there's obviously public participation. So you have to figure out whether we'll just have a live meeting, because I don't know whether the town is capable. I don't know.
If you have, I don't know, we might be able to have it at.
I'll figure out the in person.
Yeah.
Or
You
not.
figure that out.
I
But-
can-
So I would just suggest to everybody that obviously it's Easter weekend and then it's school break in town. So if you're looking for any public to be around, they're not going to be available. So if you want to do a Saturday, I would suggest April 30th.
Yeah, I won't be able to make that day. I'll be
Yeah,
traveling.
that's the last weekend of session, so we're normally in that day.
I cannot do the 23rd. I could do the 16th if you want to meet on that day, but I can't do it in person. I have to do it virtually.
I can't do the 23rd either, so.
The 16th is the day before Easter, right? Is that?
If you want to have a virtual meeting, I'll do it, but yeah. I can also squeeze in a meeting the weekend between the April 25th and 29th if you guys can't do the 30th.
April 25th and 29th. Oh, what do you mean?
Why can't we have a meeting that week? Yeah.
That's what I'm
The
saying.
week of
Like,
the
if you want to
25th.
add another meeting, then I could finagle something.
A Monday night meeting you're talking about.
Whatever you want. I mean, I have an RTM
Yeah.
meeting, but if you need me to be here, I'll be here.
Yeah, I'm only available Monday that week, the 25th.
Can we do the 25th?
The 25th of April?
Yeah.
What time is that going to be? Can we start at 5 by any chance and try and get me to my 8 p.m. RTM meeting?
I
Do we
can
know
give it a
when
go
this-
at 5.
Anybody want to do it? Anybody Everybody do a morning meeting that, I don't know if Steve, that works for you, but can we do a morning meeting? No? Can't do even a virtual morning meeting?
Who said no?
I think John.
I gotta
Anybody,
work.
is anybody opposed to working on a Sunday? Is anybody opposed to working on a Sunday, or is that frowned upon?
I mean, I can, I guess. Which
I
Sunday?
mean, I could do Monday, I could do Sunday the 24th, and I could do Sunday, May 1st.
I could
Can't
probably,
do the 24th.
I can do the
Can't do the-
24th.
I can't do the first. Okay.
and I can't do the first.
24?
I can
No,
do
I'll
the-
be out of town. Can't do it.
Oh.
Well,
Why can't we do Monday?
we're
the
getting close
25th?
on the 25th.
I have an RTM meeting. If we can start early and
Oh,
I
I'm
can try
sorry,
and get out
Pam.
by, yeah, I'm sorry. I don't mean to be a pain.
No, you're not. Can we start early on the 25th so Pam can get to her meeting? If we start like at 5:30?
That's
Or
fine.
I could start at 5. I could start at 4. What's the earliest people could start?
I'm flexible that day.
Yeah, I'm
Me
flexible.
too. I'll make myself available. I'll go in early.
Entirely
Yeah, I mean, I
open.
could start. I can do it any time on the 25th. I just if I could get out by 8, I would be incredibly appreciative.
I'm flexible, so don't worry about me. I'll be there.
Honestly,
Can we
Want
do
to give
4?
it a go for the 25th
Can we do?
at 4 o'clock?
That'd be great.
That'd be great.
Yeah, and that's the last full week before session ends, so if something happens, Chris, you may just have to take over in the beginning, and then I'll just join when I can.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
Excellent. So for April 25th, special meeting, 4 o'clock.
okay.
And that's
So-
going to be remotely, right? We have to do it remotely.
Yeah.
Just because
Yeah.
of our schedules and stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
And what did we say? 5, what time?
4 o'clock?
4 o'clock.
4?
All right, so at the next meeting, guys, do you want to continue? I'll do a markup of what we've talked about. And I will also,
Just one thing. Prue is at work at that time, 4. So do we need to?
is there somebody else who can convene the meeting?
She could.
All right,
She's
I'll do-
4:30.
I work until.
Well, we can
4:30,
start
but-
it. We can't Marlene, you're the secretary. Can't you get the dial-in instructions and start it?
It's not a dial-in, it's the
Yeah.
WebEx. I'll do it. I'll do it.
I'd
Okay,
have to
thank
go.
you.
I'd have to go
Thank
into
you.
town.
Okay.
So at the next meeting, we will continue with what we're doing now, as opposed to moving on to the police chief and other departmental issues and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's just
Yeah.
pick up right where we are here,
All right.
and then we'll circle back at the two big issues, the
That's the-
RTM.
Yeah, that's the 14th.
That's the
Yeah.
14th. Yes. Good. Excellent.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you again, Steve.
Thank everyone. Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Have a good
Bye.
night, a good week.